Chapter 129. Tai Luo Sek's Fifth Order Master knew that he was doomed this time. Since that was the case, he had to drag one of them down with him. On the other side, Qiao didn't get a response from Lu Yi. Looking at the situation on both sides, she decisively chose Song Xie and Tao Tiangang's side. She felt that these two weren't the opponent of the Fifth Order Master. If she didn't help, Song Xie might be fine, but Tao Tiangang, who was injured, would definitely die. In the central mountain hall, Han Zhiyu was no longer as proud as before. Her pretty face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping water. She looked at the location where the two hunting teams were fighting. Every time a black dot was extinguished, it was like a heavy slap to her face, slapping her in the face until she was dizzy and seeing stars. Ha 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 ha! Tang Wu, who had always been expressionless, was laughing so hard that he couldn't stop slapping the moon shadow plate. He really didn't expect that the premeditated battle of Tai Luo sect would develop like this. He also couldn't figure out how his own hunting team could achieve this, but the enemy had already lost 2 Fifth Order Masters and 1 Fourth Order Master. The remaining 2 Fifth Order Masters probably wouldn't live long. In the end, his own hunting team won. This made him the happiest. He faintly felt that this matter had something to do with the Fourth Order Master called Yi, because no one else had this ability. He felt more and more that recruiting Yi was the best choice he had made in this Dragon Spring meeting. Tang Wu's laughter made Han Zhiyu even angrier. His body trembled violently as he stared at the scene on the shadow moon plate. Seeing that another black dot representing the Fifth Order had been annihilated, he couldn't help but close his eyes. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. Her junior brothers and junior sisters were getting worse and worse with each generation. What a waste of her good arrangements! Qin Wanli moved a little to the side, a little away from Han Zhiyu. He was afraid that this woman would vent her anger on him later. The battle continued, but it was a 5-on-1 situation. Lu Yi had joined forces with Xie Jin earlier. After killing his opponent, he immediately rushed over to support Qiao and the others. He was the last Fifth Order Master. It wasn't that he didn't want to run, but even if he was a Fifth Order Master, facing 3 Fourth Order Masters, it wasn't easy to escape. In this situation, once his back was exposed to the enemy, he would be courting death. Now that he was fighting 1 against 5, there was no way he could survive. After a dozen breaths, this Fifth Order Origin Realm cultivator cursed angrily. He wanted to drag the injured Tao Tiangang down with him, but in the end, he failed to do so. When he used his last spirit talisman, he slowly fell into a pool of blood. The battle had finally come to an end, and with Tao Tiangang seriously injured and Song Xie slightly injured, they had managed to kill 4 Fifth Order and 1 Fourth Order enemy. There was a huge disparity in strength between the two teams, but in the end, the weaker side won a complete victory. This was truly unbelievable. For a moment, the way the four looked at Lu Yi changed. Everyone knew that it was Lu Yi who had single-handedly turned the situation around. He was the one who had taken the initiative to kill the enemy's Fifth Order body cultivator, and then killed the Fifth Order Dharma cultivator. If it weren't for Lu Yi, they would probably have died here. We still need to support the assault team, Xie Jin said. Lu Yi turned his head and glanced at Tao Tiangang. This guy's injuries weren't light. He had lost a lot of blood and his face was extremely pale. At this moment, he was leaning against a big tree and gasping for breath. He looked like he would die at any moment. Junior brother. Xie Jin looked at him with shame in his eyes. Tao Tiangang forced a smile and said weakly, "Don't worry about me, I'll go back by myself. I've already sent a message to someone to pick you up. We have to win," Tao Tiangang said seriously. Xie Jin nodded heavily. When the 5 Tai Luo sect cultivators died, 2 of their mounts were also bitten to death. This was, of course, Hu Po's doing. Compared to the mounts they had seen in the past few days, Hu Po was the strongest. This allowed him to have an absolute advantage when fighting with other people's mounts. The remaining 3 demonic beasts also disappeared along with their master's death. The 4 got on their mounts and charged towards the peak under Lu Ye's lead. The cultivators from the 2 sects had already been fighting for half a day there. On the surface, Blue Feather Mountain's side had a slight advantage. This was Han Zhiyu's plan. Because of this, it would be more convenient for her to send out her hunting team to support them. In her mind, her hunting team would be able to eat Lu Ye's group clean and then turn to support her own team. They didn't have many people, but they had 4 fifth-order cultivators and one of them was a magic cultivator. Once they joined the battle, they would be able to turn the situation around in an instant and catch Blue Feather Mountain off guard. But in the end, their hunting team was completely wiped out. This caused the already bad situation to become even worse. When Lu Yi and the others charged into the battlefield, the group of Tai Luo sect cultivators who were guarding the peak were obviously stunned. Because they had received news that as long as they could hold on for a while, their own hunting team would come to support them. There were several fifth-order cultivators among them, which could help them turn the tide. But after waiting for half a day, what they received was actually someone else's support. This was very heart-wrenching. The 4 people and 4 mounts had just experienced a fierce life-and-death battle, and each of them had consumed a lot of energy. Rushing into the battlefield like this was limited, so under the leadership of Lu Yi, the 4 of them only wandered around the edge of the battlefield. They came and went with a rumble, distracting the enemy's energy while looking for an opportunity to attack. Qiao Qiao liked this kind of fighting style the most because the spirit artifact in her hand was a long whip, which had the longest attack range. If the enemy cultivators were not careful, they would be tied up by her. They would either be dragged to the ground in a sorry state, or be dragged to her side to be killed by Xie Jin and Song Xie. Lu Yi didn't try to snatch the kill because he knew how to use spells. One after another, fat firebirds fell into the enemy's camp. If they were lucky, they would always be able to kill some, and even if they were unlucky, they would still be able to injure some unlucky cultivators. Under this strategy, the already weakened Tai Luo sect cultivators suddenly felt the pressure increase. Cultivators were killed one after another, and Blue Feather Mountain's advantage increased little by little. In the main hall, Han Zhiyu looked powerlessly at the battlefield, watching the black dots being annihilated one by one. She had also mobilized her own hunting team to help, but it would take some time for those hunting teams to arrive. Even Tang Wu couldn't just leave those hunting teams alone. Every hunting team that went to provide support was stopped. It was even more unrealistic to transfer people from the nearby mountains, because this time, Blue Feather Mountain was not attacking only one mountain. At least 5 or 6 mountains were engaged in fierce fighting, but there was no obvious difference between the strong and the weak mountain. The situation was in a state of anxiety, and the casualties were not high, except for the mountain where Lu Yi and the others were. She had already ordered a retreat, because if they didn't retreat, her useless junior brothers and sisters would probably be killed on that mountain. But it was not so easy to retreat. This was a battle of life and death. If one rashly exposed one's back to the enemy in battle, sometimes they would only die faster, especially when Lu Yi and the other 3 were hunting around. The battle didn't end until night. On the mountain where the 2 sides fought, the smell of blood was so thick that it almost couldn't disperse. Broken limbs and minced meat were everywhere, and the scene was like a scene from hell. Corpses of Tai Luo sect cultivators could be seen from the top of the mountain to the bottom. They were all killed while fleeing. In this battle, Blue Feather Mountain had won a complete victory. Lu Yi and the others were exhausted. Their battle was over, and they were retreating to the valley behind them under the leadership of Xie Jin. But the battle between the 2 sects was not over. After taking that mountain, Blue Feather Mountain didn't send anyone to stay behind. Those who could still fight rushed to the nearby mountains, where the battle was still in a stalemate. In the main hall, Han Zhiyu was so angry that she almost smashed the Shadow Moon disc. She turned her head and looked at Tang Wu with red eyes. Are you really going to kill us all? Tang Wu snorted coldly. I don't see Tai Luo's sect showing mercy to Blue Feather Mountain. We are on opposite sides. What are you talking about? Aren't you afraid that people will laugh at you? Han Zhiyu gritted her teeth and looked up at Qin Wanli. Qin Wanli avoided her gaze. He knew that the Qin family would not have an easy time in the future. He didn't want to refuse Han Zhiyu's request for help, but he didn't dare to make any more trouble. If he dared to send reinforcements to Tai Luo's sect at this time, Blue Feather Mountain would teach them a lesson tomorrow. This was a bloody lesson that the Qin family had learned at the cost of hundreds of lives. If Han Zhiyu's gaze wasn't so frightening, he even wanted to persuade her not to be too stubborn. It was not good to offend Tai Luo's sect, but he had to consider the lives of the Qin family first. Very good. Han Zhiyu was so angry that she laughed. She knew that there was nothing she could do at the Dragon's Spring meeting. She thought back to all the previous arrangements and the battle of wits and courage with Tang Wu. She had really made one wrong move, and the result was that she was doomed eternally. She closed her eyes, raised her hand and pressed it on her battlefield mark. She issued an order that made her feel heartache. In the next moment, a large number of black dots on the mountain peaks retreated. Even the mountains where the battle was going on did the same. The black dots were annihilated one by one, representing the lives of Tai Luo sect cultivators. She didn't dare to look, for fear that she would change her order. Her last remaining reason told her that she had to cut her losses. Otherwise, Tai Luo's sect would only sink deeper and deeper into this quagmire. At this time, Lu Yi and the others were crossing the mountains. Xie Jin sent a message to the rear and learned that Tao Tiangang had been treated and his life was no longer in danger. Everyone was relieved. Although they had only known each other for a few days, they had undoubtedly established a good friendship through the life and death battles. Xie Jin kept reporting the situation at the front line to everyone. Song Xie and Qiao Qiao both cheered when they heard that Tai Luo sect was retreating en masse and that Blue Feather Mountain was chasing after them. Lu Yi was currently checking on Yi Yi's situation. Yi Yi had been injured by a fifth-order body cultivator in order to help him. Lu Yi had seen her injuries before. It was the first time they met when Yi Yi went to get the barrier-breaking fruit. Yi Yi's body was much dimmer when she came back and it took her a month to recover. Chapter 130. After checking and confirming that Yi was fine and only needed to rest for a while, Lu Yi finally relaxed. Furthermore, Hu Po was much stronger than before, so Yi wouldn't take too long to recover. It wasn't until late into the night that the four of them returned to the valley. Lu Ye's tent had been left open the entire time. Mu Ling was already waiting, so she treated him with great care. However, halfway through her treatment, Lu Yi had already fallen into a deep sleep. He had been running around for the past few days, fighting great battles one after another, so he was truly exhausted. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. He was still covered in a blanket. Lu Yi got up and looked around in a daze. He didn't see Hu Po, but he heard Qiao Qiao's voice from outside the tent. For you to eat, it's good stuff. It's really fragrant. You'll know once you try it. Hey, even if you don't want to eat, don't bite me. Let go of my hand. Lu Yi put on his clothes and walked out. He saw Hu Po's bloody mouth biting Qiao Qiao's arm. Qiao Qiao's body twisted strangely. She wanted to pull her arm out of the tiger's mouth, but she didn't dare use too much force. Their eyes met and Lu Yi frowned. What are you doing? Only then did Hu Po let go of her arm and walk over to Lu Yi to rub against him. Qiao held a bloody piece of beast meat in her hand and raised it high. I fed it something, but it still bit me. Yi Yi, your pet beast is too outrageous. Hu Po immediately whimpered. Lu Yi looked at him, then at Qiao. His gaze gradually became unfriendly. Don't drug it. Qiao was confused. What drug? What drug? Who's going to drug it? Lu Yi had already turned around and entered the tent. Hu Po followed. Outside the tent, Xiao Xiao looked around and put the beast meat in her storage pouch with a guilty conscience. She muttered softly, "It's that good." She wasn't talking about Lu Yi, but Hu Pu. He turned around, whistled, and left as if nothing had happened. Sitting on the bed, Hu Pu picked up a storage pouch from the side and walked over, placing it beside Lu Yi. It was the reward from Green Feather Mountain. Previously, after the battle ended every day, Xiejin would hand over the day's remuneration when they rested. Over the past few days, Song Xie, Qiao Qiaoer, and the others could be said to have earned a lot. Lu Yi picked up the storage bag and checked it. He found that there were nearly 180 spirit stones inside. Compared to yesterday's harvest, these spirit stones were undoubtedly more, but considering Lu Ye's contribution to the entire battle, Green Feather Mountain naturally had to show some appreciation. Including his previous savings, he now had more than 560 spirit stones. This was not only a reward for merit points, but also the spoils of war. The storage bags of the cultivators from the Tai Luo sect and the Qin clan were collected by the Green Feather Mountain sect. Each storage bag was priced at 5 spirit stones, which was the same as the Tianji Business Alliance. There were also some low-grade spirit tools. These spoils of war were divided equally among the 5 members of the team. He checked his battlefield imprint. Name, Lu Yi. Identity, Jade Blood Sect Disciple. Cultivation, 53 apertures. Location, Spirit Stream Battlefield. Merit points, 368. When he arrived here a few days ago, he had already opened 52 apertures. Over the past few days, he had opened another aperture. The main reason was that he had been fighting all this time and had used up too much of his energy. The spirit pills he took were all used to replenish his energy, which caused the speed of opening apertures to slow down. Compared to when he set out from Ing Mountain, his merit points had increased by a lot, from 174 to 368. It had increased by almost 200 points. One could imagine how many Tai Luo sect cultivators had died at Lu Ye's hands. But it wasn't strange when he thought about it. On the first day he broke into the 100 Peaks Mountain, he killed more than a dozen people along the way. After that, he followed Xiejin's team. Most of the time, they wiped out the other party's team. Especially in the last battle yesterday, those escaping cultivators couldn't escape the hunting team's pursuit. He had used up a lot of spirit pills. These days, he had to replenish his spirit power. In addition to Hu Po, who was a spirit pill eater, he had more than 400 spirit pills when he entered the 100 Peaks Mountain, but now he only had 300 left. Compared to the consumption, he had gained more. Overall, he had earned a lot by participating in this Dragon's Spring League. After he had counted his materials, Lu Yi took another shower and changed into a set of clean clothes. Then, he took Hu Po to find food. Not to mention other things, the food provided by the Green Feather Mountain was quite good. It was provided all day long. He could go there when he wanted to eat. Along the way, he met Xiejin. After a conversation, he learned that the Green Feather Mountain had achieved a great victory yesterday. The Tai Luo sect martial artists had retreated from the peaks and shrunk their defense line. Currently, among the 100 peaks, the Green Feather Mountain had occupied 50. They had created an unprecedented situation. Judging from this situation, most likely the Dragon Spring League would maintain the status quo until the end. It was because regardless of the Qin clan or the Tai Luo sect, they had both suffered great losses in the previous confrontation. They no longer had enough people to occupy more peaks. Maintaining the status quo was the best choice. Ever since the Qin clan had joined the Dragon Spring League, the Green Feather Mountain had never achieved such a significant victory. Xiejin said that senior brother Tang Wu had sent him a message and praised him. While Lu Yi stuffed a fat piece of meat into his mouth, he said, "This way we don't have to fight anymore?" "It's most likely so." Xiejin nodded. Yesterday's battle could be considered as ending the Dragon Spring League in advance. Lu Yi understood. If this was the case, then he must consider leaving this place. Usually, the Dragon's Spring League would last for a month. However, this time, it had only started for a dozen days. He could not just waste time here. As if he had seen through Lu Ye's thoughts, Xie Jin looked around and whispered next to Lu Yi, "Junior brother Lu Yi, don't be in a rush to leave." Senior brother Tang Wu said that after the Dragon Spring League ends, our team can all enter the Dragon Spring. Lu Yi raised his brow. Was there such a good thing? Xie Jin laughed. Yesterday's victory was all because of junior brother's efforts to turn the tide. My Green Feather Mountain has always been fair. If such great contributions cannot allow junior brother to occupy a spot, then in the future, there is no need to recruit freelance martial artists. This was buying the bones of a horse with 1,000 taels of gold. In the jade slip that Xie Jin had given him before, it did say that if the freelance martial artists recruited made great contributions to Green Feather Mountain, they could be allocated a spot to enter the Dragon Spring. Lu Yi had also heard Song Xie and Xiao Qiao talk about this when they were chatting. Generally, there were not many spots allocated to outsiders. At each Dragon Spring League, only 1 or 2 outsiders could enter the Dragon Spring with the disciples of Green Feather Mountain, but this time there were 3. The spots to enter the Dragon Spring were actually very precious. Green Feather Mountain spots were not only used by their own disciples, but also by many medium-sized and large sects that were on good terms with Green Feather Mountain. Some of their disciples with outstanding aptitude would often come to Green Feather Mountain at the beginning of the Dragon Spring League to wait for the result. However, because of the previous contract, they could not interfere with the Dragon Spring League. As a result, the spots allocated to freelance martial artists were extremely precious. After all, 4 low-level martial artists, entering the Dragon Spring to temper their physique was better than taking many treasures. No matter what path they took in the future, it was always right to have a stronger physique. Xie Jin patted Lu Ye's shoulder. "Junior brother, don't worry. This Dragon Spring League is very likely to end early. After all, senior brother Tang Wu and the others' time is also very precious." In the main hall of the central peak, in front of the Shadow Moon Plate, Tang Wu crossed his arms and suggested, "It can end now. What do you two think?" Qin Wanli turned his head and glanced at Han Zhaoyue, not daring to say a word. Han Zhaoyue sneered. "It's only halfway. What's the hurry?" It was not that she did not know that Tang Wu was telling the truth. At present, Tai Luo's sect did not dare to act rashly. Continuing the stalemate would only be a waste of time. However, she just did not want Tang Wu to have his way. In any case, she was too lazy to listen to anything Tang Wu said. Tang Wu said indifferently, "What's the point of wasting time here?" Han Zhaoyue laughed. "I think it's quite interesting. Anyway, it was not only her time that was wasted. This woman was a typical example of harming others without benefiting herself." Tang Wu turned his head. "Do you think that Tai Luo's sect can sit back and relax if they shrink their defense line like this?" Han Zhaoyue provoked him. "Then come and fight. Can you beat them?" When the Tai Luo sect's defense line shrank, it meant that their defense had increased. On the other hand, the Green Feather Mountain had occupied 50 peaks, and their manpower had become scattered. Fortunately, they had recruited a large number of freelance martial artists, or else they would not be able to defend all of them. However, it would be somewhat difficult to launch an attack. Han Zhaoyue had also grasped this point. That was why she had acted so unscrupulously. It could be said that regardless of which side it was, they had reached their limit. Even the Qin clan was the same. Tang Wu turned his head and stared at Han Zhaoyue for a while. Then, he passed down orders. After a short while, the blue light spots on the Shadow Moon Plate moved. From the most forward peak, the martial artists of the Green Feather Mountain who were guarding the peak quickly retreated. Soon, that peak had become an ownerless land. However, at the same time, blue dots scattered from a few nearby peaks and gathered at the foot of one of the peaks of the Tai Luo sect. They had formed a large team. Not only that, from the valley inside the Green Feather Mountain, 5 blue light spots were moving forward at a rapid speed. When she saw this scene, the corner of Han Zhaoyue's eyes twitched. She understood that Tang Wu had pulled out that hunting team. After half a day, the 5 blue dots that had set out from the valley regrouped with the Green Feather Mountain martial artists at the front. They gathered at the foot of the peak of the Tai Luo sect. There were no less than 50 densely packed light spots. Han Zhaoyue's chest moved up and down as she revealed an unsightly expression. Tang Wu turned to look at her and did not speak a word. Qin Wanli did not know what riddles these two guys were playing. He did not understand why the Green Feather Mountain would give up a peak and transfer people to gather at the foot of the peak of the Tai Luo sect. Amidst the silence, Han Zhaoyue gave a long sigh. She extended her hand and tapped on her own battlefield mark. A message was sent out. Soon, on the opposite side of the ownerless mountain peak, a few black light spots started to move. They ran to occupy that ownerless mountain peak. However, judging from the slow movement speed of those black light spots, clearly they were feeling extremely uneasy. However, until they climbed up the peak and occupied it, they did not encounter any attacks. A wise choice. Tang Wu curled the corner of his mouth. As if Han Zhaoyue had been hollowed out, she said, "This dragon spring meet ends here. What does the Qin clan think?" What could Qin Wanli think? Of course, he would cheer loudly. It was only at this moment that he slowly realized what had happened. Chapter 131. Tang Wu's fancy maneuver seemed to be confusing, but in fact, it presented Han Zhaoyue with 2 choices. The first choice was for the Green Feather Mountain to give up a mountain to the Tai Luo sect and the Dragon Spring gathering would end. If Han Zhaoyue chose this option, then it would be good for everyone. However, if Han Zhaoyue did not accept this, then the second choice would come. The gathered disciples of the Green Feather Mountain would immediately launch an attack on the mountain of the Tai Luo sect. With that hunting team, even if they could not take down this mountain, for sure they would make the Tai Luo sect suffer some losses. There were a dozen days until the end of the Dragon Spring gathering. As long as they had that invincible hunting team, the Green Feather Mountain would always hold the initiative. With 2 choices placed before him, as long as Han Zhaoyue had some sense, he would know which one to choose. In the end, Han Zhaoyue did not insist and sent out a few martial artists to occupy that ownerless mountain. Don't underestimate a mere mountain. One more mountain would make a difference. If Green Feather Mountain had one more mountain, it would occupy 50% of the total land. If Green Feather Mountain lost one mountain, it would occupy 40%. When such a result spread out, the Tai Luo sect would also look better. Only now did Qin Wanli understand the twists and turns in this matter. Instantly, he shivered. Indeed, he was too naive when these 2 cunning old men were fighting a battle of wits and courage. Since they had reached a consensus, there was no need to waste any more time. Soon, the 3 of them announced the end of this Dragon Spring gathering. When the news spread out, the disciples of the 3 sects were both happy and worried. To the Green Feather Mountain, this Dragon Spring gathering had been full of ups and downs. Initially, the Green Feather Mountain was not a match for the Tai Luo sect. They had lost the initial 40 mountains. However, in the end, under senior brother Tang Wu's arrangements, they had come back from the dead. Not only did they suppress the Tai Luo sect and the Qin clan, they had achieved a result that far surpassed any previous times. With this achievement, Tang Wu's position at the Green Feather Mountain would certainly rise sharply. As long as he did not make any major mistakes, it would only be a matter of time before he would be put in an important position by the higher-up. Lu Yi, who was meditating in the tent, also received the news from Xie Jin. He secretly praised Green Feather Mountain for its high efficiency. In the morning, Xie Jin told him that the Dragon Spring meeting should be over soon, and this news was confirmed in the afternoon. Although the Dragon Spring meeting was over, there was still a day before they could enter the Dragon Spring to temper their physique. This was because the Green Feather Mountain had to arrange the list of people who would enter. In addition, the disciples of other sects who were waiting at the Green Feather Mountain encampment had to rush over, so it would take some time for them to get there. Lu Yi didn't pay any attention to the hustle and bustle outside. He only focused on meditating and cultivating in the tent. The excitement of others was ultimately others. Only one's cultivation was his own. At dawn the next day, Xie Jin came to find Lu Yi and told him that the list of names to enter the Dragon Spring had been confirmed. Their entire team was on the list, and they would immediately rush to the central peak to gather and wait to enter the Dragon Spring. A moment later, 5 people and 5 horses rushed in the direction of the central peak under Xie Jin's lead. They crossed over mountains and ridges all the way. Unlike the state of the previous mission, at this time the team was full of laughter. Tao Tiangang, who had not recovered from his serious injuries, laughed too loudly. As a result, his injuries were affected and he grimaced for a long time. With a mount, the speed was still very fast. In just half a day, the 5 people arrived at the central peak and climbed to the top of the peak. An ancient hall immediately came into view. This hall should have existed for a long time. After all, the Dragon Spring meeting had already started 100 years ago. Outside the hall, there were already many Green Feather Mountain disciples waiting. Seeing the arrival of Xie Jin and the others, they all greeted them warmly. Xie Jin nodded in response. When they arrived at the hall, the 5 people turned over and got off their mount. Xie Jin led everyone to the front of the hall and cupped his fists. "Senior brother, I've brought them. Come in." A strong voice came from inside. Xie Jin led Lu Yi and the others into the hall. Entering the hall, Lu Yi saw the shadow moon plate placed in the center at a glance, but before he could take a closer look, he felt an extremely sharp gaze staring at him. Lu Yi looked up and met the eyes of a woman. This woman was very charming. Even if she was looking at him with murderous intent, she still gave him a strange sense of seduction. This is probably the 9th order from Tai Luo sect, Lu Yi thought to himself. He immediately became vigilant and secretly circulated his spirit qi. Although he knew that he was no match for a 9th order, if the other party attacked him, he would not sit still and wait for death. What does Tang Wu mean by calling us here? To draw hatred? Lu Yi frowned slightly. In the past few days, a lot of Tai Luo sect cultivators had died at his hands. In the last battle, it was their hunting team that destroyed all of Han Zhiyu's arrangements. It was not an exaggeration to say that this woman couldn't wait to cut Lu Yi and the others into 1,000 pieces. Green Feather Mountain had already won a great victory. It was unwise to pull them out at this time to provoke others. Don't open your eyes so wide. It's easy to scare the children, Tang Wu said lightly. On the surface, he looked calm, but in fact, he was secretly happy. He looked at Lu Yi. "Show me your battlefield mark." Lu Yi didn't know what he was going to do, but he still raised his hand and urged his battlefield mark. Immediately, a light blue light appeared on the back of his hand. "It's done." Tang Wu nodded. Xie Jin led everyone out of the room. In the hall, Tang Wu said, "Did you see it with your own eyes?" "What?" Han Zhiyu glared at Lu Ye's back. For a moment, she didn't come back to her senses. Suddenly, she came back to her senses and cursed, "You bastard!" Tang Wu had asked her for the bet several times, but she refused with the excuse that she didn't see it with her own eyes. Now that Lu Yi showed the light of his battlefield mark in front of her, there was no room for her to pester him. "With the heavens' will as my witness, you must accept your loss." Tang Wu stretched out his hand to her. Han Zhiyu was furious, but under the heavens' will, even if she was unwilling, she could only stretch out her hand and wipe her battlefield mark. A red light flew towards Tang Wu, and she cursed, "Be careful not to choke." 200 merit points. Han Zhiyu's heart ached. "Ha!" Tang Wu took back the red light and looked at Qin Wanli with disdain. "And you?" Qin Wanli was startled. "Me? What does it have to do with me? I'm just here to watch the fun." "Stop talking nonsense." 20 merit points. "If it's any less, I'll twist your head off." Tang Wu said fiercely. He wasn't so polite to Qin Wanli. Qin Wanli didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Only now did he remember that when Han Zhiyu wanted to bet on which camp that young man was from, he did bet 20 merit points. But he was betting with Han Zhiyu, and it had nothing to do with Tang Wu. It was unreasonable for Tang Wu to jump out at this time and ask him for the bet. Sighing, Qin Wanli also wiped his battlefield mark and a red light flew towards Tang Wu. Although they were both ninth-order cultivators, he really couldn't afford to offend these two. The people from Blue Feather Mountain had all arrived. After all, they had gathered at 100 Peak Mountain. After the list was confirmed, they could quickly gather. After waiting for less than an hour, a large number of cultivators ran up from the foot of the mountain. This group of cultivators basically had a mount for each of them. Their mounts all looked extraordinary. Not only that, their attire was undoubtedly more glamorous than the others. Seeing this scene, Lu Yi immediately understood that these people should be cultivators from the sects that were on good terms with Blue Feather Mountain. They had been waiting at Blue Feather Mountain Station during the beginning of the Dragon Spring Festival. Now that the Dragon Spring Festival was over and the Dragon Spring was about to open, they gathered here. There were quite a lot of people in this group, about 30 to 40. Many of the Green Feather Mountain disciples were extremely envious as their mounts rumbled past them one after another in an imposing manner. The heritage of the sects in the outer circle was incomparable to the sects in the inner circle and even the core circle. This could be seen from the comparison of these low-level cultivators. When the cultivators arrived in front of the main hall, they got off their mounts and gathered in groups of 3 to 5, chatting with each other. It seemed that many of them were familiar with each other. Lu Yi discovered a very strange phenomenon. Senior brother Xie, why can't I see any cultivators above the 5th order here? Not only were the cultivators of Blue Feather Mountain like this, but these cultivators from other sects were also the same. There was no one above the 5th order. Xie Jin explained, the Dragon Spring has little effect on cultivators above the 5th order. This is one of the reasons why the cultivators participating in the Dragon Spring Festival are limited to the 5th order. As for why this is the case, I don't know, but it has been confirmed before. Lu Yi immediately understood. Xiao was a little worried. After we go in, what about the mounts? With so many monster beasts gathered together, it was easy to cause chaos without a master to restrain them. It would not be good if a few mounts accidentally died. Xie Jin smiled. Don't worry about that. Someone will lead your mounts to the beast cages later, and take care of them. This was not the first time the Dragon Spring Festival was held. Every time, many cultivators from other sects would come over on their mounts, so Blue Feather Mountain would naturally settle them down. Not long after, the person in charge of arranging the mounts came over. Accompanied by Lu Yi, Hu Po was placed in a beast cage. There were almost 100 beast cages here, more than enough to accommodate the cultivator's mount. Everything was ready. When night was about to fall, a rumbling sound suddenly came from below the mountain peak, followed by an earthquake. Just when everyone was confused about the situation, Tang Wu's figure walked out of the main hall, looked around at everyone, and said in a clear voice, "The Dragon Spring has been opened. Junior brothers and junior sisters, please enter in order. This time, the Dragon Spring will be open for 9 days, and each of the 3 sects will occupy 3 days. Everyone, please act according to your ability and do not try to be brave. Let me say the ugly words first. If any accident occurs during the tempering process, my Blue Feather Mountain will not be responsible." After a brief speech, under Tang Wu's signal, the cultivators from other sects entered the main hall one by one. After they walked in, it was the turn of the cultivators from Blue Feather Mountain. Previously, Blue Feather Mountain had seized 49 mountains in the Dragon Spring Festival, so there were 98 people arranged to enter this time. However, after more than 30 people were allocated, there were only about 60 spots left. This number was actually not small, but compared to the entire Spirit Stream realm level of the sects, it was not enough at all. Therefore, for a long time, Blue Feather Mountain had very few spots to recruit rogue cultivators. This time, there were 3 spots because Lu Ye's team had contributed too much. Chapter 132. A secret passage leading underground had been opened in the main hall at some point in time. Cultivators walked in one after another, and the hollow sound of footsteps came from the depths below. Everyone followed the secret passage all the way down, and after walking for about half an hour, they arrived in front of a bronze door. The door was thick and simple, and it gave off a sense of vicissitude. A flying dragon was carved on the door, and it was lifelike, as if it was a living creature. The door was already open, and there was a faint red mist surging behind the door. The cultivators who came here did not stop, and they all rushed into the red mist and disappeared. The open bronze door and the surging red mist seemed to have an invisible beast entrenched inside, swallowing the cultivators into its stomach one by one. Lu Yi was behind Xie Jin, and he followed him into the red mist. However, after walking in, he suddenly felt a sense of weightlessness. This feeling came and went quickly, and by the time Lu Yi came back to his senses, Xie Jin's figure was nowhere to be seen. Not only him, but even the cultivators who had walked in before could no longer see him. Lu Yi did not panic. On the way to the gathering point, Qiao had asked him some things about the dragon spring. Xie Jin did not hide anything and told her a lot, but because his cultivation was not high, what he knew was also hearsay. One of them was the strange experience of entering this place. Everyone who entered here would appear in an independent small space, and would not have any interaction with others. As for why this was, Xie Jin could not say. He only knew that the elders of the sect speculated that this place seemed to be related to the secrets of space. Lu Yi turned his head and looked around. The faint red mist was not too dense, so it did not completely cover the surrounding environment. He looked around for a while and found that the place he was in seemed to be a secret room. In the center of the secret room, there was a spring the size of a bowl that was spewing out spring water. The spring water did not flow in all directions, and soon seeped into the ground, and as the spring water gushed out, a faint red mist dissipated. This secret chamber wasn't big, only about 10 meters in length and width. Apart from the mouth of the misty spring, there was nothing else in the chamber. The current situation made Lu Yi feel strange. He did not know where the others had gone, but he thought that they were all like him, in an independent secret room. There were probably some secrets hidden in this place. Lu Yi wasn't in the mood to explore these things. The nearby forces had been entrenched here for so many years. If there were any secrets, they would have long been discovered by them. There wasn't much time left. Lu Yi walked to a corner of the room, took out a prayer mat, and sat down cross-legged on it. At this point, Xie Jin only needed to meditate and cultivate normally. As he breathed in and out, the faint red mist would temper the cultivator's body. Lu Yi was a little worried. He had never been normal throughout his cultivation journey. After a series of attempts, as expected, this kind of meditation did not have the slightest effect. The light red mist lingering around his body was not absorbed into his body at all. This mist was the true source of tempering a cultivator's physique. If it couldn't be drawn into the body, it naturally wouldn't have any tempering effects. Lu Yi had already prepared a countermeasure to this. He began to construct spirit-gathering runes in his spiritual cavities. The spirit-gathering runes could transform into tiny funnels and draw the world's spiritual energy into Lu Ye's spiritual cavities. If the light red mist here was the world's spiritual energy, the spirit-gathering runes should be able to display their effects. Soon, a spirit-gathering rune took shape. Lu Yi immediately had a different feeling. Under the guidance of the spirit-gathering rune, the mist was gathered and poured into the spiritual cavities through the funnel-shaped rune. It was different from when he was cultivating. When the mist poured into the spiritual cavities, Lu Yi immediately felt a slight pain. It was not intense, as if someone had taken a needle and lightly poked him. This made him feel relieved. Xie Jin had said that this was a normal phenomenon. Tempering the physique was not a pleasant experience. Everyone would feel pain here. This was also the reason why Tang Wu had told everyone to act according to their abilities. The higher the cultivation talent of a cultivator, the greater the benefits they would receive. Correspondingly, the greater the pain they would have to endure. As the spirit-gathering runes continued to display their effects, the slight pain continued to spread. Lu Yi could almost ignore this pain. He began to construct the second spirit-gathering rune. After a while, the third, the fourth, when he had constructed the 30th spirit-gathering rune, Lu Yi lightly snorted. At this time, as the light red mist continued to pour in, the pain became extremely obvious. It no longer felt like a needle was gently poking him. Instead, it felt as if there were many needles in his body, constantly moving through his limbs and bones. Lu Yi temporarily stopped constructing the spirit runes. He felt that if he continued like this, he would not be able to hold on. The pain became more and more intense. When it reached its peak, Lu Yi suddenly felt as if his whole body was on fire. His muscles bulged, and the veins on his forehead bulged. He looked extremely sinister. The intense pain made him sweat profusely, drenching his clothes. But soon, the pain began to ease again. Although it did not completely disappear, it was much better than before. Lu Yi calmed his mind and constructed the spirit-gathering rune again. 31, 32 until the 40th. Once again, he reached his limit. The same feeling as before was transmitted. His body began to burn again, and the pain began to ease. He constructed the third spirit rune. Until all his spirit cavities were reinforced with spirit-gathering runes, there were a total of 54 of them. The light red mist from all around swarmed in and was swallowed by Lu Yi. He clenched his fists and endured with great difficulty, his body constantly trembling. Suddenly, 2 huge blood-red eyes appeared in his mind, staring at him from the sky. Those blood-red eyes were filled with a chaotic and murderous aura. Under its gaze, Lu Yi felt a chill run down his spine. After what seemed like an instant, but also like a million years, Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes, but there was nothing in front of him. His expression was one of bewilderment. He didn't know if it was an illusion or something else, but under the gaze of those blood-red eyes, he clearly heard an old voice. That voice said something, but Lu Yi didn't hear it clearly. The pain in his body had completely disappeared at some point. His stomach was growling, and he felt an intense hunger he had never felt before. Pucci, a strange sound came out. Lu Yi looked over and saw that in the middle of the secret room, there was a flat object spurting out with the spring water. He looked at it in bewilderment for a moment, wanting to get up and grab it, but after taking a few steps, he felt that something was wrong. His body seemed to be somewhat unbalanced. It was not the kind of imbalance that made him dizzy, but rather an imbalance that he could not control. He clearly wanted to go to the spring, but after a few steps, he crossed the spring and arrived at the other side of the secret room, almost hitting the wall. Hurriedly stopping, he closed his eyes and silently examined his body. His qi and blood seemed to be more than twice as abundant as before, and his flesh and blood had become more powerful. He gently clenched his fists, a powerful force surging. His physique had received a very exaggerated upgrade. This was the root of his inability to control his body. Because his strength had increased too much in a short period of time, and his speed had also increased very quickly, but his mind had not yet adapted to the improvement of his body. When he calmed down, even everything around him seemed to have slowed down. Could the tempering of the dragon's spring really have such great benefits? Lu Yi was somewhat bewildered. It should not be like this. If the tempering of the dragon's spring really had such great benefits, this place would have long been occupied by the top sections. How could it be the turn of Green Feather Mountain and Tai Luo sect to hold the dragon spring gathering? Although the top sects were all stationed in the core area, they only needed to send some people. Jin had said before that tempering in the dragon's spring did have benefits, but it was not enough to make a person reborn. Compared to the body-tempering treasures occupied by the top sex, the dragon's spring was still much worse, so Lu Yi and the others should not have too much hope and only do their best. However, in addition to tempering the physique, the dragon's spring also had another effect, which was why the disciples of the top sex had come to take a share of the profits. But at this moment, Lu Yi clearly felt that he had been reborn. He took a deep breath, slowly calmed his mind, turned around, and began to slowly walk around the secret room. At first, it was not very smooth. He was like a baby who had just learned to walk, and if he was not careful, he would bump into the wall. But after walking a few laps and adapting to the changes in his body, the situation became better. It was not until now that he found that the light red mist that was originally here had disappeared without a trace. The spring was still spewing water, but there was no more mist overflowing. The hunger was getting stronger, as if he had not eaten for many days. For the time being, Lu Yi ignored the inexplicable object that was spewing out from the spring and continued to walk around the secret room, taking out some dried meat from his storage bag. After eating more than 10 kilograms of dried meat, he felt full. Dang, a clear sound rang out. Lu Yi was startled at first, but then he reacted. Dang, the sound became urgent. Jin said that when the bell rang 3 times, it meant that the time was up and everyone had to leave. 3 days had passed? Lu Yi was a little surprised. He felt that he had only been here for half a day. Before the final bell rang, he quickly walked over to the spring, grabbed the object that had spewed out from the spring, and stuffed it directly into his storage bag, not even having time to investigate what it was. The feeling of weightlessness from before came again, and Lu Yi only saw a blur in front of his eyes before he appeared in front of the bronze gate. The surrounding area was bustling with people. Obviously, everyone had been sent out. A sour and foul smell wafted out, causing Lu Yi to frown. The smell was extremely strong, and there seemed to be more than one kind of smell. Many women were so stimulated by the smell that they began to retch. Get out, it stinks!" Someone shouted and took the lead to return. Chapter 133. There were many impurities in a cultivator's body, and these impurities would be expelled during body tempering. Not only were there impurities, but there were also pill toxins. The disciples of large sects came here to use the dragon's spring to temper their bodies, but the main reason was to expel the pill toxins that had accumulated in their bodies. Before coming here, they would take large amounts of pills to improve their cultivation, ignoring the accumulation of pill toxins. After a trip to the dragon's spring, the pill toxins would be completely removed, and they would be able to improve their cultivation in a short period of time. This caused everyone in the group to stink. With 98 people gathered together and the lack of ventilation underground, it was easy to imagine how sour the smell was. It was no wonder that those female cultivators who loved to look pretty would retch from the smell. When they came, everyone was slow, but when they returned, they moved as fast as lightning, quickly entering the main hall on the mountain. Immediately, people from Blue Feather Mountain led everyone to a nearby spring. After tempering their bodies, they immediately went to bathe, which was almost a standard procedure. There were many springs nearby, so men and women were separated. An hour later, Lu Yi washed his body and changed into a new set of clothes, feeling much more refreshed. Jin walked over with a smile. "Junior brother, how was your harvest?" "It was okay." "That's good, but the effects of this tempering don't seem to be as good as before. I don't know if Junior brother has noticed, but the mist in the secret room has become much thinner in the last 2 days. When we came out, it was almost gone." "Isn't that normal?" Lu Yi felt a little guilty. "It's not abnormal, but it's a little different from what I heard. The reason why the dragon's spring only opens once every 3 years is because the light red mist needs time to accumulate. If too much is consumed at once, the people who go in later won't be able to temper their bodies." Speaking of this, he laughed with some schadenfreude. I'm afraid the Tai Luo sect still doesn't know what's going on. They'll only come out 3 days later, so I'm afraid they'll return empty-handed this time. Then they're miserable. Xie Jin laughed. In any case, my Blue Feather Mountain is done here, so the rest has nothing to do with us. Lu Yi nodded and said, Senior Brother Xie, this matter is over, so I'll be leaving first. He was just passing by and was involved in the Dragon Spring meeting, obtaining many benefits. Not to mention the merit points and spirit stones, the final tempering of the Dragon Spring was not a small opportunity. Although it was delayed for 10 days, it was still worth it. He still had to rush to the Blue Blood Sect station, so he didn't want to stay here for long. Xie Jin looked around and said, Junior brother, don't be in a hurry to leave. It might not be safe for you to leave now. Lu Yi said thoughtfully, the Supreme Luo sect and the Qin clan? Xie Jin nodded. You don't need to pay attention to the Qin clan. The key is that woman with the surname Han from the Supreme Luo sect. This time, Junior Brother has contributed too much to the Dragon Spring League. If you did not have protection, how could that woman with the surname Han have let you go? Previously, Senior Brother Tang Wu specially instructed me to ask Junior Brother to accompany me for the time being, and he will personally escort Junior Brother back once he's done with the matters at hand. Lu Yi calmed down slightly. The reason he was in such a hurry to leave was because he was afraid of that female cultivator from the Tai Luo sect. He hadn't forgotten the way she looked at him when he entered the hall. At this moment, the Tai Luo sect's disciples were tempering their bodies in the Dragon Spring, and she couldn't leave. Therefore, Lu Yi felt that if she wanted to leave, she had to leave quickly. Otherwise, when she was free, she wouldn't be able to leave even if she wanted to. However, Green Feather Mountain had obviously thought of this as well, which was why Tang Wu had warned Xie Jin. As for Qiao Qiao and Song Xie, Lu Yi thought of the 2 freelance martial artists who had fought side by side with him. Xie Jin laughed. Junior brother, you don't need to worry about them. Senior Brother Tang Wu has already asked for instructions from the sect. When we return this time, they will be accepted into the sect. Lu Yi inwardly praised the Green Feather Mountain for their good plan. This way, he would be the only one allocated to outsiders in the Dragon Spring. However, although Qiao Qiao and Song Xie were freelance martial artists, they were not inferior to the martial artists of the Green Feather Mountain. This time, they had performed extremely well in the Dragon Spring League and were worthy of being accepted by the Green Feather Mountain. In the future, they would no longer be freelance martial artists without any backing, but people with a sect. Blue Feather Mountain did not send out any invitations to Lu Yi, because in their opinion, Lu Yi must have come from a large sect and had come here to hone his skills. Who knew what kind of big tree was behind him, so why would he take a fancy to a small sect like Blue Feather Mountain? After the two chatted for a while, the disciples of the Green Feather Mountain had already started to gather. The Dragon Spring League had ended and they were about to return to the sect. In the main hall, Han Zhaoyue looked at Tang Wu unwillingly. 800 spirit stones and 300 merit points. I will give it to you personally. It has nothing to do with the sect. Qin Wanli looked down at his feet, as if he did not hear anything. Tang Wu's face was slightly angry. Are you humiliating me or do you want to fight? He glared at Han Zhaoyue. If you dare to talk nonsense again, don't blame me for embarrassing you. With that, he strode out of the main hall and did not give Han Zhaoyue a chance to continue speaking. When he reached the door of the hall, he threw an item and stepped on it. He rushed into the sky and swept away in an instant. Looking in the direction he left, Han Zhaoyue gritted his teeth. Bastard! She would not give Tang Wu so many benefits for no reason. 800 spirit stones and 300 merit points were just money to buy Lu Ye's life. Unfortunately, she was rejected by Tang Wu. The Dragon Spring League was not the only Dragon Spring League. Tang Wu naturally would not do such a thing. If he really did that, how could he recruit rogue cultivators to work for him in the future? It took 2 days to go from the central peak to the Green Feather Mountain station. The journey was not far, but it was not short either. The mighty group moved forward. Halfway through the journey, Xie received a message. He checked it and looked up at Lu Yi. Junior brother Lu Yi, wait here for a moment. Senior brother Tang Wu will be here soon. Lu Yi nodded. Everyone knew that it was time to part. Xiao rode her big wild boar forward and looked at Lu Yi with a smile. Junior brother Lu Yi, you must remember elder sister's good. Come and see elder sister when you miss elder sister. Before Lu Yi could speak, Hupa growled at her. Xiao's face immediately darkened. She could not afford to offend him. Song Xie sat cross-legged on his scorpion. He walked past and saluted Lu Yi. Take care. Lu Yi returned the salute. Take care. Xie and Tao Tiangang also said goodbye to him. Soon, the group from Green Feather Mountain crossed the mountain and disappeared. Lu Yi rode Hupu and waited for a moment. Then, a stream of light came from the horizon. The strong fluctuations of spiritual energy were very obvious. The stream of light came closer and revealed its true appearance. It was a small boat. Tang Wu stood at the front of the boat with his hands behind his back. He looked very confident. Seeing Lu Yi, he raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Get on." Lu Yi thanked him and got on the boat with Hupu. Up! Tang Wu formed a seal with one hand. The spiritual energy around his body surged and the boat rose into the air. This was the first time Hupa had experienced this kind of battle. It immediately roared and lowered its body, afraid that it would fall. Lu Yi comforted it a little and it finally calmed down. Junior brother, where are you going? Tang Wu asked. Lu Yi really wanted to ask him where he could send him. If possible, he certainly wanted Tang Wu to send him to somewhere near the Blue Blood sect. That way, he wouldn't have to travel so quickly. But this was obviously impossible. There was still a long way to go to the Blue Blood sect. Tang Wu was only sending him out of morality to prevent him from being targeted by Han Jiyu. Since the other party had good intentions, Lu Yi naturally had to be tactful. Senior brother, please wait a moment, Lu Yi said and took out the 10-point map to check. Tang Wu saw this and smiled slightly. I can send junior brother there within 2 days. I have an appointment with someone in 2 days and have to keep it. He was also afraid that Lu Yi would point him to a place far away, so he explained in advance. Lu Yi simply handed over the 10-point map. Head west. Wherever senior brother can go. Tang Wu laughed and took the 10-point map. After checking it, he said, then let's go to Ian City. What do you think, junior brother? Lu Yi returned the 10-point map and looked for the direction of Ian City. He nodded and said, I'll do as senior brother says. Thank you, senior brother. It's a small matter. Tang Wu waved his hand and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Sure enough, Lu Ye's origin was extraordinary. He always carried a 10-point map worth a few hundred spirit stones with him. When he went out to explore, he couldn't even afford a 3-point map, let alone a 10-point map. However, with his cultivation and strength, he wouldn't be jealous of a 10-point map. He just felt a little emotional. In terms of value, Tang Wu's boat was much more valuable than the 10-point map. Cultivators at the spirit stream realm couldn't fly with their physical body. Only those who had reached the Cloud River realm could have this ability. However, when one's cultivation reached a certain level, they could fly with the help of a spirit artifact. Although the consumption was not small, it was always more convenient to travel. Lu Yi didn't know what kind of cultivation was required to fly with a spirit artifact, but obviously a 7th-order cultivator couldn't because when Dong Shu Yi chased him, he didn't have a spirit artifact. He glided all the way, which was far worse than flying. They weren't familiar with each other, and neither of them was a cheerful person, so they were relatively silent along the way. Every 4 to 6 hours or so, Tang Wu would descend and cultivate to replenish his spiritual energy. Lu Yi naturally didn't think that Tang Wu had used up all of his spiritual power. Tang Wu was doing this to preserve his own combat strength. After all, no one knew when danger would strike them while they were on the spirit stream battlefield. Keeping one's spiritual power at full capacity was the best way to deal with any unexpected situations. With someone beside him, Lu Yi couldn't swallow too many spirit pills to cultivate, and it was useless to cultivate with spirit stones. He could only construct spirit-gathering spirit veins in his spirit aperture and sit cross-legged, pretending to cultivate. 2 days later, the light landed in front of a city. They had arrived at peaceful Peace City. Lu Yi jumped off the boat with Hu Po and turned to salute. "Thank you, senior brother, for escorting me all the way." Tang Wu smiled. "It's a small matter. Let's part here. See you again." "See you again." Looking at the fleeing light, Lu Ye's face was filled with envy. When could he be so carefree? However, the road was paved one step at a time, and rice was eaten one bite at a time. Compared to other cultivators, his cultivation speed was already very fast. It had been almost 5 months since he entered the spirit stream battlefield, and he had already opened 54 apertures. This was basically impossible in the early stages of cultivators. Turning around, Lu Yi looked at the city in front of him and jumped onto the tiger's back. It was already late and he was unfamiliar with this place. It was better to rest for the night in the city. Moreover, he needed to buy some supplies. Chapter 134. Compared to the markets that Lu Yi had been to before, Ian City was truly a big city. Lu Yi didn't know who built such a big city, but the liveliness in the city was obviously not something a market could compare to. The city walls were 20 feet tall and majestic, and the city gate alone was several feet tall. According to the map, Ian City had 12 gates. Lu Yi entered the city from the southeast gate. As far as the eye could see, the road that could allow several carriages to drive side by side went straight ahead, as far as the eye could see. On both sides of the road were numerous stores that sold all kinds of goods. People came and went, jostling one another. Although it was night time, the city was brightly lit, and it was a bustling scene. Lu Yi walked around and took a look. It really opened his eyes. However, he soon discovered something strange. There seemed to be a lot of mortals in the city. At first, he thought that those people had cultivated the aura-concealing technique or were wearing some kind of spirit artifact that could conceal their spiritual aura. However, after thinking about it carefully, he realized that it wasn't possible because there were so many of them. It wasn't until a drunk guy suddenly fell to the ground that Lu Yi realized that these people weren't cultivators, but mortals. There were mortals in the spirit stream battlefield? Naturally, there were mortals in the spirit stream battlefield. Those who belonged to sects could return to the 9 states through the Tianji pillar at any time after entering the spirit stream battlefield. However, it was different for loose cultivators. Although they could do so, they would have to wait for someone to come back. Therefore, many loose cultivators wouldn't return to the 9 states after entering the spirit stream battlefield. They would marry and have children here. The descendants of loose cultivators might not necessarily become loose cultivators. Over the years, there were many more mortals in the spirit stream battlefield. Relatively speaking, it was easier for mortals in the spirit stream battlefield to open their apertures because the environment here was better. Therefore, many sects liked to look for suitable candidates in the spirit stream battlefield and take in disciples. However, the spirit stream battlefield wasn't a safe place. There were many fierce beasts and fights between cultivators were common. Because of this, it was almost impossible to find any traces of mortals in the wilderness. Generally speaking, only large cities would have space for mortals to live in. For example, the market city that Lu Yi had visited before wouldn't have any mortals in it. There was also a small river flowing in the city. Under the night sky, there were a few boats floating in the river. On the boats were young men and women taking a night trip. After walking around the city for more than 2 hours, Lu Yi bought the supplies he needed. The things he bought the most were food and clothes. Needless to say, both he and Hu Po had huge appetites, so they couldn't eat less than 20 to 30 kilograms of meat in a single meal. They didn't buy much food this time because there was a lot of demonic beast meat stored in their storage pouch, all of which were bitten to death by Hupo during the dragon's spring meeting. The meat of demonic beasts was much more nutritious than the meat of ordinary beasts. It was also Lu Yi and Hupo's favorite food, especially the meat of a demonic snake. It tasted extremely good. Unfortunately, ever since they left Azure Cloud Mountain, they had only eaten it a few times, but they didn't have the luck to eat it again. As for his clothes, he basically had to change into a new set after every battle. Either his clothes were stained with the enemy's blood or his own, so it was never clean. After asking for directions, Lu Yi rode on Hupo and headed straight for the Tianji Business Alliance. Although there were inns in the city, Lu Yi was more used to staying in the Tianji Business Alliance. At the very least, his safety was guaranteed. Moreover, 1 spirit stone per night was not expensive. He could afford it with his current wealth. Under the waning lights, a woman's scream rang out. She reached out to cover her back, tears welling up in her eyes. She had been taken advantage of by a young man in embroidered clothes while she was strolling around the night market. The young man in embroidered clothes looked extraordinary. He wore a luxurious robe and was adorned with gold and jade ornaments. He had a wretched smile on his face as he raised his hand to sniff it. "Smells good." The woman's husband accompanied her. After learning the whole story, he stepped forward to argue with the young man, but he was knocked to the ground by the young man's evil slave. He screamed miserably. A cultivator at the side couldn't stand it anymore and wanted to teach this playboy a lesson. However, just as he stepped forward, he noticed that there was another person in front of the young man. Looking closely, he saw that the person was emitting a dense spirit chi. Impressively, he was a 6th order cultivator. 6th order spirit stream realm cultivators were rare in the outermost circle of the battlefield. Being able to appear beside this playboy as a guard, it was obvious that he had an extraordinary background. This person only wanted to stand up for the injustice, but now, he didn't have the courage to do so. He was only a 3rd order spirit stream realm cultivator. What a scandal! He angrily spat, turned around and walked away. Out of sight, out of mind. There were many injustices in this world, so how could he care about all of them? All right, don't beat him to death. The playboy young master spoke, and the evil slaves dispersed. Those who knew this playboy young master were already used to it, and only shook their heads and sighed. The woman who had been taken advantage of threw herself at her husband and cried. The playboy young master let out a long sigh, turned around and patted the 6th order cultivator's chest. How boring, old dong. Old dong, the 6th order cultivator's eyes twitched. He raised his head and looked at the full moon in the sky. What kind of sin did I commit? He betrayed the sect, and his 3 orifices were broken. His future was hopeless. In order to get rid of the sect's investigation, he fled day and night to this place. Relying on his previous connections, he joined a 9th order family. Originally, he thought that with his 6th order cultivation, even if he wasn't put in a very important position, he would at least have some status. After all, there weren't many 6th order cultivators in the outer circle. A person like him could easily take charge of a station and become a deputy protector. He used to be a guardian. The family he had sought refuge with was full of enthusiasm when he received him, but after he joined, he was assigned the task of protecting their young master. This kind of job could be summed up in one word, and that was bodyguard. He, a dignified 6th order cultivator, was actually going to be a mortal's bodyguard? When he heard this news, he felt like his whole body was going to split open. He comforted himself that this was just a test. After all, he had betrayed the sect, and it was already good enough that someone accepted him. The young master he was assigned to guard was the same as all playboys in the world. All day long, he brought a few evil slaves to run amok in the city, causing people to complain. Apart from doing good things, he didn't do anything. Previously, he was even beaten up and almost lost his life. Although the young master was immortal and wasn't favored by the patriarch, his beautiful mother was the patriarch's favorite. As a mother, how could she not love her son? Under the instigation of that cheap servant girl, he, who had sought refuge with the young master, was assigned to be his young master's bodyguard. After a few days of contact, he found that this young man's personality wasn't just bad. Just like just now, he didn't have to do anything to the young lady, he just had a cheap hand. After a day, if he didn't touch 8 or 10 girls, he wouldn't be able to stay idle. Many people in the city knew him, and most of the young ladies didn't dare to say anything even if they suffered a loss, so they just let it go. However, this fellow had a sense of propriety and never provoked cultivators. The people he bullied were all ordinary people. It was unknown how a mortal like him could have trained his eyes to distinguish between cultivators. It could only be said that everyone had their own talent. He also wouldn't easily kill anyone. Just like just now, he only ordered a few evil slaves to beat someone up. This was probably the biggest reason why he was able to live until now. Of course, another reason was that his family was strong enough. "Let's go, old Dong," the young master called out and led the few evil slaves away. Old Dong followed with a dark face, feeling that his life was gloomy. At the southeast gate, a carriage stopped and a young man led 2 people into the city. The city was full of flowers, which dazzled the eyes of the 2 people who had never seen the city before. The young man in the lead was a 5th-order cultivator, while the other 2 were only 2nd-order cultivators. They were a man and a woman. "There are many people in the city. Don't run around. If you get separated, we won't be able to find you," the young man warned. Of the 2 2nd-order cultivators, the woman obediently nodded and followed her senior brother. The man, on the other hand, smiled and said, "Junior sister, don't listen to senior brother's threats. We have the battlefield mark, so if we get separated, we can still contact senior brother." "Oh, right," the woman suddenly reacted and turned to look at her senior brother, her beautiful eyes full of expectation. The senior brother had a headache inside. "All right, you can go shopping by yourself. Remember to find me at the Heavenly Secret Commerce Union. We will stay here for the night and set off tomorrow." "Understood, senior brother." The woman was overjoyed and disappeared into the crowd with the 2nd-order cultivator. The young man sighed helplessly and walked towards the Heavenly Secret Commerce Union. On the 3rd floor of the Commerce Union, Lu Yi sat cross-legged in his room. 54 spirit apertures were gathering spirit chi, and the surrounding world energy was constantly flowing in. He was not in a hurry to cultivate because there was something he had not had time to investigate. Reaching into his storage bag, he took out a flat object. It was the one he had spat out from the dragon spring. At that time, he was pressed for time, so he only had time to put it into his storage bag. Later, Tang Wu was beside him, so he could not investigate it. Only now did he take it out. Ah Wu, what Lu Yi did not expect was that when he took it out, Hu Po actually growled and lowered his body, glaring fiercely at the object in Lu Ye's hand. This was Hu Po's display of hostility. Lu Yi was puzzled and looked at Yi. Yi quickly comforted him and communicated with Hu Po for a while before explaining. Hu Po can't explain it clearly. It was just an instinctive reaction. Instinctive? Yi nodded. Lu Yi lowered his head and looked at the object in his hand. It was palm-sized and oval-shaped. At first glance, it looked like a fish scale, but upon closer inspection, it did not look like one. Snake scale. Lu Yi suddenly remembered that there was a flying dragon pattern on the bronze gate. The scales on that dragon were very similar to the one in his hand. Could it be a dragon scale? But why would a dragon scale spit out from the dragon spring? Moreover, he had never heard Xie Jin mention such a thing. If a dragon scale had spat out from the dragon spring before, then this matter could not have been concealed, because it was not only the Blue Feather Mountain sect that had undergone body tempering in the Dragon Spring. Lu Yi recalled the two huge blood-red pupils that appeared in his mind during the body tempering process. What is that? What is this? Chapter 135. Was it a coincidence that he obtained this thing? It didn't feel like it. Lu Yi recalled the scene at that time. After he reinforced all 54 of his spiritual cavities with spirit-gathering spirit runes, a huge blood-red pupil suddenly appeared in his mind. He also faintly heard an old voice, but Lu Yi couldn't clearly hear what the other party said. Immediately after, a dragon scale sprayed out from the dragon's spring. This didn't seem like a coincidence. It seemed like there was some kind of power that specifically sent this dragon scale to him. It seemed that there were some secrets hidden under the dragon spring, secrets that even Green Feather Mountain's Tai Luo sect didn't know about. Lu Yi didn't think too much about it. It was useless to think about it now. His cultivation was still too low. Looking at what seemed to be a dragon scale in his hand, Lu Yi found that this thing was blood-red, as if fresh blood was flowing inside. A somewhat familiar aura flowed out from this scale. It came from the same source as the faint red mist near the dragon spring. The reason why the dragon spring could temper a cultivator's physique was because of the faint red mist. When a cultivator meditated and breathed the mist into their body, their physique would be strengthened. Then this scale, Lu Ye's mind became active. If this was really the case, then this scale was a priceless treasure. The dragon spring was fixed in one place, and could only be opened once every 3 years. If one wanted to enter, they had to participate in the dragon spring meeting and fight to the death. However, this scale was on him and could be used at any time. But how to use it, Lu Yi was a bit troubled. The reason why he was able to temper his physique in the dragon spring was because under the guidance of the spirit-gathering spirit pattern, the faint red mist continuously surged into his body. If the faint red mist was considered a special kind of energy, then the energy on the scales had already condensed into a solid state. Under such circumstances, the spirit-gathering spirit runes naturally couldn't be used. At this moment, his 54 spiritual cavities were reinforced with spirit-gathering spirit runes. If it was useful, it would have already been used. Just as he was at his wit's end, Hupa suddenly came over and buried his head in Lu Ye's chest. He suddenly sucked at the scale on Lu Ye's hand. A line of blood visible to the naked eye flowed out from the scale and was sucked into Hupo's mouth. Hupo immediately stiffened and fell down. Hupa! He was shocked. Lu Yi also hurriedly got up to check the situation. After a moment, the man and the spirit looked at each other and relaxed. Hupa was fine, but it seemed to have fallen into some kind of nightmare. Although it was lying on the ground in a deep sleep, low growls kept coming out of its throat. Not only that, there was a faint bloody light flashing on the surface of its body. Lu Yi, is Hupo all right? He was still worried. It should be fine. Lu Yi recalled the feeling of being tempered by the dragon spring. I probably inhaled too much. I couldn't resist it and fainted. When he was tempering his body in the dragon spring, he had endured a lot of pain, and that was only the light red mist. However, Hupa had just sucked out a line of blood, and that blood-red line was clearly much stronger than the mist. Both of them were the same type of energy and had the effect of tempering the body. After suddenly enduring the immense pain, Hupa fainted. If he wasn't mistaken, the red light on its body was tempering its physique. With Hupa as an example, Lu Yi didn't dare to have any devious thoughts. If he wanted to use the energy in this scale armor, he had to think of a safer way. Putting away the scale armor, Lu Yi and Yi observed Hupa for a while to confirm that it was really fine. Yi could also sense that Hupo's vitality was increasing at an extremely clear rate. As his vitality increased, his physique would naturally become stronger as well. It was just as Lu Yi had guessed. The scale armor was a good thing, regardless of whether it was a dragon scale or not. Lu Yi solemnly put the scale armor into his personal storage bag, ate something, and got up to practice his saber. This time, the feeling of practicing his saber was different from any other time before. After his physique became stronger, Lu Yi could clearly feel that the speed and strength of his attacks had greatly increased. It was at least 30% faster. This increase was very terrifying. He didn't know how others had improved, but he didn't think it would be as much as he did. He had absorbed too much of the light red mist in the dragon spring, causing the mist in that small space to disappear completely. He thought of Hua Xiai again. If this woman saw him again, she would probably suspect that he was walking the path of body cultivators. Lu Yi felt that his current physique and vitality were even stronger than the fifth-order body cultivators he had seen in Tai Luo sect. For the whole night, Lu Yi didn't cultivate and just practiced his saber, using this method to familiarize himself with his suddenly strengthened body. At dawn, Hu Po woke up. He examined him and found that there was nothing wrong with him. His vitality had increased by a large amount, and even his snow-white fur had become more lustrous. Opposite the merchant union was Drunken Spring House, which dealt in the sex trade. However, the women here were not only mortals, but also rogue cultivators with some cultivation, so the business was very prosperous. After a night of tossing and turning, the exhausted young master pushed open the door with his clothes in disarray. Outside the door, old Dong stood there with his hands behind his back like a wooden stake, resting with his eyes closed. He did a pretty good job as a bodyguard. If the young master hadn't lost his temper last night, he would probably have stood at the bedside for the whole night, becoming a true bodyguard. "Let's go, old Dong," the young master called out, feeling satisfied as he recalled the various tastes of last night. To ordinary mortals, cultivators were all high and mighty, but he wasn't an ordinary mortal. He didn't degrade those mortal women because he had a better place to go. Compared to those mortal women, female cultivators with cultivation were undoubtedly more to his taste. This gave him a sense of superiority as he played. So what if they were cultivators? They could throw out a lot of spirit stones, but this young master could still do whatever he wanted. The debauchee young master walked in front, old Dong the bodyguard followed behind, and the brothel keeper enthusiastically sent the few evil slaves away. Two figures hurried towards the merchant union. The man in the lead had a long face, not knowing what he had done wrong. The young girl following behind him also had an ugly expression. This was the first time these two young cultivators had seen such a bustling city, so everything was new to them. As they strolled around, they forgot about the time. It wasn't until their senior brother sent them a message that they remembered what they were here for. They hurried towards the Tianji Merchant Union, ready to meet up with their senior brother. Recalling their senior brother's reprimand, the two young cultivators felt very uneasy. "We're here." When they arrived at the entrance of the Tianji Merchant Union, the two of them were panting heavily. However, neither of them dared to stop and hurriedly rushed inside. A huge tiger's head suddenly appeared, scaring the woman into screaming. The young man instinctively protected her. However, the tiger only glanced at them before walking away. The young girl patted her chest, only now realizing that this wasn't the wilderness. There were many cultivators with pet beasts in the city, but such a majestic pet beast was rare. The young man was also sizing up the snow-white tiger. Suddenly, he exclaimed in surprise, widening his eyes to take a closer look. After confirming that his eyes weren't playing tricks on him, he hurriedly chased after the tiger. In a flash, he arrived in front of the person beside the tiger and blocked his path. He pointed at him with a pensive expression. "You are..." Lu Yi placed his hand on the hilt of his saber and looked indifferently at the young man in front of him, gathering spirit energy in his eyes. A second-order spirit stream realm cultivator could cut down several with a single slash. But why does he look so familiar? A few dozen meters away, at the breakfast stall outside Drunken Spring House, the debauchee young master was eating delicious dumplings. Suddenly, his face lit up and he pointed in a certain direction. Old Dong, that snow-white tiger is really beautiful. Go ask that person how many spirit stones he can sell it for. Let's buy it. Old Dong's face darkened. Suppressing the anger in his heart, he raised his head and looked in that direction. Slowly, his eyes widened, almost suspecting that he was seeing things. After looking carefully, he confirmed that his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. The little brat who should have died at his hands was actually still alive. How could he not die? At that time, his merit points had clearly been deducted, and there were pieces of flesh and blood floating from the bottom of the pool. No, he was in a hurry to return to the sect at that time, so he didn't go down to check. If there was another third-order cultivator underwater at that time, was there such a coincidence? There were always many coincidences in this world. For example, Old Dong was eating breakfast here with the debauchee young master, and the young master saw the snow-white tiger. For example, that young man blocked Lu Ye's path. You're that Lu Yi. The young man finally remembered. A few months wasn't too long, and the name Lu Yi at that time was really unforgettable. Yes, you're that Lu Yi. Lu Yi frowned. He also recognized the other party. He was one of the mine slaves who had been rescued by Grand Heaven Alliance with him, but this person had come to the mine late. In addition, Lu Yi had always been alone and didn't have much interaction with others, so the two had only met twice before and hadn't even spoken a word. How could he meet this person in this place? Lu Yi was extremely depressed. Could there be such a coincidence in this world? It's me, Wu Hua, who joined Burning Moon Mountain. Don't you recognize me? Wu Hua seemed very enthusiastic. Regardless of whether he had any friendship with Lu Yi at that time, it was also a kind of fate that he could meet someone he knew here. You've got the wrong person. Lu Yi didn't want to talk to him anymore, so he jumped onto the tiger's back and left. Got the wrong person? Wu Hua was confused. Impossible. He wanted to chase after him, but a voice suddenly sounded behind him. What are the two of you doing? Wu Hua and the young woman stiffened. When they turned to look, they saw their senior brother standing behind them with an unfriendly expression. Senior brother. The two of them hurriedly bowed. When the young woman saw that her senior brother was about to lose his temper, she quickly said, Senior brother Wu, you've met someone you know. Wu Hua was stunned. He nodded and said, Yes, it's that person riding a big white tiger. He pointed with a finger. The young man looked up and saw Lu Ye's figure blending into the crowd. However, he still managed to catch a glimpse of the spiritual light on Lu Ye's body. But he said I've got the wrong person. Wu Hua was slightly confused. I didn't. He's that Lu Yi. The young woman chimed in to divert her senior brother's attention. Lu Yi? That's a strange name. Wu Hua smiled and said, His real name is Lu Yi, but someone gave him a nickname because he only has a one-leaf innate talent during the innate talent test. It quickly spread. Chapter 136. Someone you know from Evil Moon Valley? The young senior brother asked. He knew the origin of his junior brother very well, so when he heard him talk about the past, he thought of the Evil Moon Valley. Yes. Wu Hua nodded. That day, I was lucky enough to join a sect. Because this guy's talent was too poor, almost no sect wanted him, but in the end, for some reason, he joined Blue Blood sect. After not seeing him for a few months, he has changed so much. When he saw it just now, he almost didn't recognize it. In the mine, everyone was disheveled and their clothes were ragged. Now that they had become cultivators, they were naturally different from before. Not only did he fail to recognize Lu Yi at first glance, but Lu Yi also failed to recognize him at first glance. You said he has the talent of a one-leaf cultivator? The young senior brother frowned. What was his cultivation base at that time? Wu Hua thought for a while and said, It seems like he just opened his spiritual cavities. Then you must be mistaken, the young senior brother said. That person is now a fourth-order spirit stream realm cultivator. It can't be? Wu Hua exclaimed in surprise. He hadn't paid attention to check Lu Ye's cultivation just now, but since senior brother said so, then it was naturally correct. One Leaf's talent was too low, and it was impossible for him to reach the fourth order in just a few months. One had to know that Yang Kai had just broken through to the second order. Did he really make a mistake? Wu Hua scratched his head. Behind them, a figure slowly walked past. His gloomy eyes flashed with a sharp light. Lu Ye of the Jade Blood Sect? Tiger crossing Mountain One Leaf? If the names matched, it meant that the other party didn't recognize the wrong person. But could a guy who had just opened his apertures reach the fourth order spirit stream realm in just a few months? Was this fellow really only at the level of a one-leaf cultivator? What was undeniable was that the other party's cultivation had indeed improved very quickly. When Yang Kai had chased after him, he was only at the third order spirit stream realm, but in just 2 short months, he had already reached the fourth order. This fellow's talent was definitely not limited to one leaf. However, to him, there was no difference between the third layer and the fourth layer of the spirit stream sect. The last time, it was because of his own carelessness that he had allowed Zhang Xian to escape. This time, he would definitely not allow Zhang Xian to escape. If he hadn't killed the young master, the Jiuxing sect wouldn't have accepted the Xian sect's declaration of war, and they wouldn't have suffered such a huge loss. He wouldn't have left the encampment to chase after the young master himself, and the encampment wouldn't have been breached. If he was in charge of the encampment at that time, how could Wang Yang be so bold? The root of everything was this person, and he had to kill him. There was also the Jade Blood Sect. If he remembered correctly, it was a famous sect in the War Province. The newcomers of the Haotian Alliance might not know about the Jade Blood Sect, but since they were born in the Myriad Devil Ridge, they had grown up listening to the stories of the elders in the sect. The reputation of the Jade Blood Sect was still well known among the younger generation of the Myriad Devil Ridge. Who are you showing such a murderous look to? In front of the breakfast stall, the young master glared at old Dong who was walking back. Where's the tiger I asked you to buy? Dong Shai turned his head to look at the young master and grinned. Young master really wants that big tiger? Of course. Isn't he going to sell it? The young master nodded. Why buy it if you want it? I'll just snatch it for you. The young master was stunned for a moment, then he smiled. Old Dong, you really understand me. Not bad, not bad. How can a bought one be better than a snatched one? Quick, let's go. Old Dong shook his head. Don't go. Just wait for me here. That won't do. How can I miss such a lively event? Old Dong, if you don't take me there, I'll go back and complain to my mother. Don't think that I don't know what you want. If you want to stand out, you can't do it without my mother's help. Old Dong looked at him deeply and said lightly, I didn't know that you're a sensible person. The young master smiled proudly. I don't have the talent for cultivation. Otherwise, I would have turned the cultivation world upside down. Old Dong, don't think that I'm a playboy who doesn't know anything. Let's make a deal. If you can snatch that big tiger for me, I'll go back and put in a good word for you in front of my mother. Since you insist, then let's go together. Old Dong turned around and left. The young master quickly stood up and left a piece of spiritual stone on the table. Then, he followed Old Dong excitedly. He had never participated in a battle between cultivators before. At this moment, he couldn't help but feel a little excited. As for safety, he wasn't too worried because his mother had told him that Old Dong was very strong. He was strong enough to walk unhindered in the outer ring of the battlefield. Therefore, she had told him to build a good relationship with Old Dong. Lu Yi rode Hupu out of the city and went forward. Although Tang Wu had only accompanied him for 2 days, it had saved him at least a month's journey. It could be seen how fast the other party was. Unfortunately, Tang Wu could only accompany him to this point. Lu Yi was already very satisfied with this. The journey to the Jade Blood Sect's encampment was long. Now that he was a fourth-order spirit stream realm cultivator, He no longer needed to be as careful as he was when he first left Blue Cloud Mountain. His ability to protect himself had greatly increased. It could be said that as long as there were no accidents, he wouldn't encounter too much danger in the outer ring of the battlefield. With abundant resources in his hands, he could cultivate and travel at the same time. It was a carefree journey. Silently calculating, at this cultivation speed, by the time he reached the Jade Blood Sect's encampment, he would probably be a 7th order or 8th order cultivator. Of course, the premise was that he had enough pills. Just as Lu Yi was feeling relaxed, his heart suddenly tightened, as if he was being watched by someone. He had experienced this feeling once before, when he was being chased by Dong Shuyi. It was a kind of prickly feeling. Did someone from Tai Luo sect chase me all the way here? Lu Yi immediately thought of this possibility and looked around, but didn't find any suspicious traces. Very weak screams and shouts came from a distance behind him. Lu Yi quickly looked over and saw a figure rushing towards him. Lu Yi hurriedly condensed his spiritual energy into his eyes, but after seeing the true appearance of this figure, he could hardly believe his eyes. Dong Shuyi? Why is this guy here? The last time he saw this guy in Tassel Square, Lu Yi took Hu Pu and quickly ran away. Firstly, he was afraid of being discovered, and secondly, he was afraid of implicating Hua Si and the others. But he never imagined that he would meet Dong Shuyi here, and that this guy would chase after him just like last time. For a moment, Lu Ye's mood was indescribably bad. If he had known that Dong Shuyi was in PC City, he would never have entered the city. It seemed that Dong Shuyi had discovered his whereabouts in the city, so not long after he left the city, the other party had chased after him. He was carrying Hu Po, and Hu Po's appearance was too good. Even strangers would take a few more glances. Dong Shuyi, who already had a grudge against him, would definitely discover him as long as he saw Hu Po. But what surprised Lu Yi was that Dong Shuyi didn't seem to be chasing after him alone. He was carrying a person in his hand, and the screams and shouts came from that person's mouth. Without time to think about what was going on, Lu Yi patted Hu Po's back. Hu Po, run, Dong Shuyi is chasing after us again. Saying this, he slapped a wind travel spirit talisman on Hu Po. The wind travel spirit talisman given to him by the head teacher had already been used when he was chased by Dong Shuyi last time. Lu Yi had bought it again, and one talisman cost 25 spirit stones, so it really wasn't cheap. Spirit talismans were the cheapest to attack, followed by defensive ones. Supportive spirit talismans were the most expensive, and wind travel spirit talismans were especially expensive. Fortunately, he had plenty of spirit stones now, so when he left the Merchant Union in the morning, he had bought 3 spare ones. He didn't expect that they would come in handy so soon. The screams behind them were endless, and Dong Shuyi, who had been chasing after Lu Yi, felt that his ears were going deaf. He couldn't help but shout, "Shut up! It's so fun, old Dong!" The young master was carried in his hand, and although he looked miserable, he was actually enjoying the thrill of going up and down. In the past, there had never been a cultivator who could play with him like this. He increasingly felt that old Dong was a wonderful person, so he put his mouth next to old Dong's ear and shouted, "Faster!" Dong Shuyi's ears buzzed, and he slightly withdrew the spirit chi protecting the young master. A gust of wind swept past, and the young master's facial features were immediately distorted by the wind, letting out strange flapping sounds. In just 3 breaths, the noisy young master's head drooped, and he fainted. Only then did Dong Shuyi once again use his spirit chi to protect him, secretly regretting bringing him out. This hedonistic son of rich parents was really too noisy. But now, he couldn't leave him alone. There were many dangers in the wild, and if he really left him alone, he might encounter some mishap, and he wouldn't be able to explain it to the main house. What made Dong Shuyi even angrier was that after not seeing him for 2 months, the big white tiger ran even faster. 2 months ago, even if the other party had the support of the spirit talisman, he could still keep closing the distance and finally catch up with the other party. But now, he found that no matter how hard he tried, he could only keep himself from being shaken off. It was impossible to catch up with the other party. Of course, this was related to his cultivation falling by one level, but the other party had obviously become stronger. The young master, who was knocked out by the gust of wind, slowly woke up and began to shout again. Dong Shuyi resisted the urge to pinch him to death, and withdrew the spirit chi protecting him. The young master fainted again, one chased and one fled, quickly leaving Ian City. Dong Shuyi knew that he couldn't continue like this. The other party had a mount and a spirit talisman, while Dong Shuyi could only urge his spirit chi to glide, which consumed too much of his spirit chi. As long as the other party had 2 more wind walk spirit talismans, it would be impossible for him to catch up. Looking up in the direction Lu Yi was escaping, Yang Kai suddenly had an idea. That direction was the range of the family station he had joined. With the young master's name, if he was lucky, he should be able to gather some helpers. Thinking so, Yang Kai urged his battlefield imprint to send out a message. On the back of the tiger, Lu Ye's heart calmed down slightly. It had been 2 months since they were last chased, and during this time, both he and Hu Po had grown. In particular, Hu Po's physique had been tempered by the scale armor last night, and the effects were obvious. Hu Po was now running faster than before. If the situation continued to develop like this, it would be impossible for Dong Shuyi to catch up to him, but that was under the premise that he had the Wind Walk Spirit Talisman. If he ran out of Wind Walk Spirit Talismans, Hu Po's speed would be greatly reduced. However, Dong Shuyi's consumption of Spirit Chi was also great. Moreover, Lu Yi didn't know whether it was an illusion or not, but he felt that Dong Shuyi's cultivation didn't seem to be at the 7th order. It seemed that Dong Shuyi was only at the 6th order. Compared to the last time they met, Dong Shuyi's spirit chi fluctuations had become much weaker. Because they were too far apart, Lu Yi didn't know whether he was seeing things or not, but he didn't want to fight with this guy. The tragedy from the last time they fought was still vivid in his mind, so he could only flee first. The sky ahead was covered with dark clouds and muffled thunder. This hateful spirit chi cultivator is really this Lu's lifelong enemy. Chapter 137. Heavy rain poured down in torrents as lightning flashed and thunder rumbled in the sky. Above the swamp, Hu Po's figure flashed like the wind and lightning. Both Hu Po and Lu Yi were covered in a faint layer of spiritual light. Although it couldn't completely block out the rain, it could at least allow them to see more clearly and not be blinded by the rain. Behind them, Dong Shai relentlessly chased after them, closing the distance between them. He was like a leech that had smelled blood as he tenaciously chased after Lu Yi. The distance between them narrowed not because Hu Po couldn't run as fast as the others, but because this swamp was too unfriendly to Hu Po. Just now, he had stepped into a quagmire, and if he hadn't been fast enough, he wouldn't have been able to escape. Coupled with the influence of the terrain, the distance between them had narrowed. The Windwalk Spirit Talisman slowly exhausted its power, and Lu Yi was about to take out another one to use when suddenly, a fluctuation of spiritual power came from the front. 2 figures soared into the air from the left and right as a large net came down on them. The net flickered with spiritual light, revealing it to be a spirit tool. And it was a spirit tool specifically used to capture monster beasts. There were many monster beasts similar to crocodiles in this swamp, half wild and half domesticated. It could be considered one of the businesses of the young master's family, so there would often be clansmen coming here to hunt for them and sell them for a good price. These 2 cultivators were originally searching for crocodiles here, but after receiving Dong Shai's message, they immediately set up an ambush here and happened to block Hu Po's escape. When the large net fell, Hu Po was flying over a pool of water. There was no place for him to use as a foothold to dodge, so he was firmly trapped by the large net and fell downwards. He had succeeded. The 2 cultivators were overjoyed. This big tiger was a monster beast that the young master wanted, so if they could capture it this time, the madam would definitely reward them handsomely. Just as they were thinking this, a figure pounced in front of one of them under the thick curtain of rain, a snow-white blade glinting. It was Lu Yi, who had jumped down from the tiger's back when the net came down and used Hu Po's broad back as a stepping board to attack one of the cultivators. That large net was a spirit tool. If he couldn't cut it open with a single slash, even he would be trapped. When that time came, he wouldn't be able to use his limbs at all, so the safest method was to separate himself from Hu Po. No matter what, he couldn't be trapped together. This saber strike was quite aggressive, and the cultivator who was attacked was also a fourth-order cultivator. Although he was shocked, he didn't panic because Dong Shu Yi had already informed them of this in the previous message. Since their cultivations were the same, he naturally wasn't afraid of Lu Yi. What's more, he had a companion next to him, so Dong Shu Yi immediately chased after him. Therefore, all he needed to do was to pester him a little. His thoughts were interrupted, and with a loud bang, the weapon in his hand was sent flying. His right hand trembled uncontrollably, and his body was swept away by a strong force. How could he be so strong? This fourth-order origin realm master was shocked. He had only ever felt such power from a fifth-order body cultivator from his clan. Before he could do anything else, another snow-white saber light flashed down. Blood mixed with rainwater splattered everywhere, and the cultivator staggered and fell into the quagmire. Lu Yi beheaded a cultivator of the same level with 2 slashes, but didn't stop and charged towards the second person. That person was just about to come to his aid, but when he saw the tragic death of his clan member, he was immediately thrown into confusion. For a moment, he didn't know whether to retreat or attack. Just as he was in a dilemma, Lu Yi had already arrived in front of him, the long saber in his hand swirling with saber light. A clanging sound rang out. This person blocked 3 of Lu Ye's saber strikes, but he couldn't block the 4th. After tempering his body with the dragon spring, the speed and strength of Lu Ye's saber had greatly increased compared to before. Compared to when he was in 100 Peak Mountain, his cultivation hadn't increased much, but his strength had. The 4th saber strike landed on the man's chest. This was the result of the man reacting quickly enough to take a step back. Otherwise, this saber strike would have cut off his head. His protective spirit energy didn't play any role. The saber slashed through, shattering his spirit energy and directly cutting open his chest. Lu Yi kicked him, sending him flying. The man let out a short scream, then completely stopped moving. 2 red lights floated in from the left and right. Lu Yi arrived in front of the trapped Hu Po in a few steps and hurriedly removed the spiritual net from its body. Just as he was about to leave, it was already too late. With a boom, as if a meteor had landed, mud splashed everywhere. A figure stood 20 zhang away, seething with killing intent, glaring at Lu Yi with eyes spitting fire. Even with the rain, it couldn't block out that hateful gaze. Dong Shai had come. Lu Yi clenched his long saber. At this distance, fleeing in front of a spirit cultivator was undoubtedly an unwise action. If he wanted to live, he could only fight. The difference between the 4th layer and the 7th layer was 3 small levels, and the gap between the spiritual cavities was about 50 to 60. It could be said that Dong Shai had opened at least twice as many spiritual cavities as Lu Yi. Dong Shai was carrying a mortal in his hand. Lu Yi only glanced at him, then didn't pay him any more attention. Although it was strange for him to bring a mortal to chase after him, this wasn't the time to think about it. So cold. The hedonistic young master hugged his arms, his teeth chattering. Although he was freezing to death, he still couldn't forget Hu Po. He raised his head and shouted at Lu Yi, "Brat over there, this young master said he wanted to buy your tiger, but old Dong insisted on snatching it. Don't blame me if you die." He turned around and ran several zhang behind Dong Shai, shouting, "Old Dong, kill him! This young master is here to support you." He also knew that he couldn't help Dong Shai much with his mortal body, so he ran away before the fight even started, so as not to disturb Dong Shai. Which family's young master was this? Lu Ye's expression became strange when he heard him call himself that. He thought of the 9 stars sex young master, young master, young master. They were all people of similar status. The only difference was that the one he killed last time was a cultivator, while this one was a mortal. Why were there always young masters and young masters making things difficult for him? How do you want to die? Dong Shai looked at Lu Yi in front of him and grinned. Lu Yi didn't speak, only narrowing his eyes and looking forward. 200 zhang was too far away. Once the other party was prepared, it would be difficult to succeed. Lu Yi let out a light breath, clenched the long saber in his hand, and stomped his foot. A circular splash zone immediately appeared on the ground, and he charged straight at Dong Shai. Who didn't charge, quietly retreating under Yi Yi's instructions, hiding in the curtain of rain. Dong Shai frowned. He vaguely felt that the explosive power of Lu Yi, a 4th-order cultivator, was somewhat unusual. It seemed to have exceeded the range of a 4th-order cultivator. But that was it. As a 7th-order cultivator, how could he let Lu Yi get close to him so easily? He didn't even have the intention to move. Raising his hand, he sent a half-moon-shaped golden arc slash at Lu Yi. He didn't use a fire attribute technique like last time because the timing wasn't right. In this damned weather, using a fire attribute technique would only make him a laughingstock. The golden arc slash was extremely fast, arriving in front of Lu Yi almost as soon as it was formed. Lu Yi gathered his spiritual energy in his eyes. He originally wanted to see where the golden arc slash would land and then activate his spirit tattoo to resist. However, when he focused his attention, everything around him seemed to slow down a lot. He could vaguely see the trajectory of the golden crescent slash coming towards him, and he had a feeling that he could dodge it. He followed this feeling and lowered his body. Immediately, a strong wind blew over his head. The powerful slash created a vacuum in the rainwater, and a few broken hairs flew in the air. I dodged it. However, the second golden arc slash had already arrived. Lu Yi raised his saber and slashed out, his spiritual energy exploding. The golden arc slash was broken, and Lu Yi couldn't help but stagger back slightly, his hand aching slightly. The third golden arc slash came. This time, Dong Shai was determined to kill Lu Yi here, so he didn't show any mercy. Lu Yi took a step back and stood straight, puffing out his chest and sucking in his stomach. He could clearly see the golden arc slash slicing past the tip of his nose. Realization dawned upon him. The benefits of tempering in the dragon's spring were not only that his physique had become stronger, allowing him to strike with more power and speed, but also that his reactions had become much faster. His eyes could now capture things that he could not see before. That was why he had the illusion that the whole world had slowed down. This unexpected discovery made Lu Ye's plan even more stable. He originally planned to use his spirit tattoo to resist the other party's attack, but if he used it, not to mention the consumption, he would still have to bear the force of the impact, which would easily cause him some internal injuries. Under the curtain of rain, Lu Ye's figure continued to close in on Dong Shai. One after another, golden crescent slashes came from that direction. Dong Shai kept dodging and slashing, and when he couldn't dodge or slash, he would activate guard to block. Occasionally, he would be repelled, but overall, he was struggling to get closer to Dong Shai. Dong Shai frowned. If someone had told him before that a 4th-order cultivator could withstand his attacks, he would have thought that person was crazy. Although he was only a 6th-order cultivator now, he had the foundation of a 7th-order cultivator. It was just that some of his spirit apertures could no longer form minor heavenly circulations, so his strength had indeed dropped a lot. However, he could kill a 4th-order cultivator with just a few spirit techniques. But now this impossible thing had happened right under his nose, and the one who had done it was the person he hated the most in his life. Dong Shai was completely furious. His spirit energy surged and condensed into a long spear in front of him. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a golden light and shot towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi suddenly felt a sense of crisis. This attack was too fast, and he couldn't dodge it at all. Moreover, it was so powerful that an ordinary spirit tattoo wouldn't be able to block it. In the blink of an eye, a washbasin-sized spirit tattoo appeared in front of Lu Yi. With a bang, the spirit energy spear hit the spirit tattoo, and Lu Yi was almost sent flying by the backlash. He bent his body and shifted his center of gravity, but his figure still couldn't stop sliding backwards. A moment later, the spirit force spear and the defensive spirit pattern dissipated at the same time. Dong Shai launched another spell at Lu Yi. Lu Yi rushed forward quickly, taking advantage of the gap between the other party's spell to shorten the distance between them. Chapter 138. 4 small circulatory cycles surged within his body as spiritual energy surged within his spiritual cavities, closing the distance between them bit by bit. 30 meters, 80 meters, after being pushed back, he charged forward once more. Blood trickled from the corner of Lu Ye's mouth as his chest tightened. He'd originally wanted to get as close to Dong Shai as possible, but when it came to actually doing so, he realized that he'd been taking things for granted. The closer the distance, the harder it would be to dodge the enemy's spells. With Lu Ye's current eyesight, he could grasp the trajectory of the spells from a distance of 30 meters, but it would be very difficult to do so within 30 meters. If it weren't for the fact that he'd constantly activated his defenses, he would have long been unable to hold on. 80 meters was his limit, but that was about it. When he was within 80 meters of Dong Shai again, he roared, "Hu Pu!" Roar. Hu Pu, who disappeared into the rain before the battle began, suddenly roared from behind Dong Shai. Dong Shai was already on guard against Hu Pu, so when the tiger's roar rang out, he turned his head and sent a golden crescent slash in that direction. The golden crescent-shaped slash cut through the curtain of rain, but it didn't seem to hit anything. Hu Pu was quick-witted, and immediately left his original spot after creating a commotion. Dong Shai didn't tangle with Hu Pu. He more or less understood Lu Ye's plan. He probably wanted to use his pet beast to capture the Silk Pants' young master and use that to threaten him. Such a childish trick wouldn't succeed. If the tiger dared to come within 30 meters of him, he'd be able to kill it in an instant. An animal wouldn't use spirit runes to block, and the Silk Pants' young master was standing 10 meters behind him. He was completely capable of protecting him while dealing with Lu Yi. So after forcing Hu Pu to retreat, he immediately turned around to deal with Lu Yi. But before he could activate his techniques, a wave of spiritual energy came from above. Looking up, he saw a large bell flickering with spiritual light crashing down, quickly blocking out the light in front of him. It was the profound spirit bell. How could he not recognize the protective spirit artifact of the 9 Stars Sect's young master? When the Xianling bell fell, he wanted to dodge, but he missed the best opportunity. The light in front of him was blocked, and he was completely covered. His face sank as he realized that he had been too careless. He also finally understood why Lu Yi was constantly approaching him despite his attacks. Lu Yi wasn't here to attack him, but simply to close the distance. If the distance was too far, the profound spirit bell might not be able to trap him. A moment of carelessness had caused him to be trapped by the profound spirit bell. However, this spirit weapon itself was used to protect the body. Although it had the effect of trapping the enemy, it was not obvious. In terms of understanding of the profound spirit bell, Dong Shai was better than Lu Yi. Just as he was about to cast a spell to break the binding of the bell, the profound spirit bell flew up again. Dong Shai raised his head and looked in the direction where the Xianling bell had landed. His face turned gloomy. On the other side, Lu Yi had one hand around the hedonistic young master's neck, and a long knife was pressed against his neck. His entire body was curled up behind the hedonistic young master, and only one of his eyes could be seen, which he viciously glared at him, killing Dong Shai 2 or 3 realms above him. Lu Yi had never imagined such a thing would happen. Although he had killed some fifth-order masters before, Dong Shuyi was far stronger than any of them. The confrontation just now had also proven this point. Lu Yi had no way to get within 8 meters of Dong Shuyi. If he couldn't even get close, how could he kill him? Could he rely on his fat bird technique that could make his enemies laugh to death? The weather wasn't suitable for fire attribute techniques either. From the beginning to the end, Lu Ye's target was very clear, the mortal young master that Dong Shai had brought here. He didn't know the identity of this young master, but from the way he addressed Dong Shai, it was obvious that he had a great background. If he wanted to escape, he could only capture this young master and use him as a hindrance. Hu Po and Lu Ye's cooperation was flawless, and this was definitely due to Yi. Although they hadn't agreed on a plan before, Yi understood Lu Ye's plan from the start of the battle. The tiger's roar had created an opportunity for Lu Yi to summon the profound spirit bell. When their gazes met, Lu Yi saw the anger in Dong Shai's eyes, and Dong Shai saw the ruthlessness in Lu Ye's eyes. The debauchee young master was already cold to the point of tears and snot, and now that he had a knife to his neck, he couldn't remain calm. "You guys can fight, why are you looking for me?" All this time, he had lacked the respect he should have for cultivators, because with the strength of his family, he could do whatever he wanted as long as he didn't go too far. Those beautiful female cultivators were also his playthings. He felt that the so-called cultivators were just that. But soon, he realized the seriousness of the problem because a chill and pain came from his neck. He panicked, "Old Dong, save me!" Dong Shai only stared at Lu Yi, the anger in his eyes growing stronger. "Tell him to scram, or you'll die." Behind the debauchee young master, Lu Yi said in a deep voice, "Brother, calm down, you're hurting me. Tell him to scram." Okay, old Dong, go away." Dong Shai said, "If I leave, you'll die without a doubt." The debauchee young master came to a realization. "That's right. If he doesn't leave, you'll die now. If he leaves, I won't make things difficult for you. You promise?" Cut the crap. The pain in his neck grew stronger, and the debauchee young master felt a warm liquid flowing down his neck. He didn't hesitate anymore. "Old Dong, hurry up and leave. I'll be safe if you leave." Dong Shai stared at Lu Yi, his face full of unwillingness. Thinking of his recent encounters, his expression twisted and his heart burned with killing intent, but in the end, he suppressed it and said in a deep voice, "Swear to the heavens. If you don't swear to the heavens, you won't be able to leave today." Lu Yi looked at him for a moment, then said, "I respectfully request the heavens. If Dong Shai doesn't make things difficult for me, I'll let this mortal go and return his freedom in 3 days." The heavens had mysteriously fallen. Although Dong Shai's heart was unsettled, this was the best result. He looked deeply at Lu Yi. "Remember what you said." He stepped into the rain. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. He stopped, looked up at the sky, and let the rain fall on his face, suddenly laughing self-deprecatingly. What a mess! 2 months ago, he had chased down a 3rd-order cultivator with a 7th-order cultivation, but due to a moment of carelessness, he had failed. 2 months later, as a 6th order, he had tried to kill a 4th-order cultivator but still failed. His spirit aperture had been broken, his cultivation had fallen, and his future was hopeless. For this reason, he had even betrayed his sect, and after finally finding refuge, he had become a mortal's bodyguard. The other party's cultivation had risen too quickly. If he missed this opportunity, would there be a next time? He had fallen into such a situation all because of this person. How could he not take revenge for such a deep hatred? Pushing his spirit chi, Dong Shai suddenly raised his hand and pointed towards Lu Yi, sending out a golden arc slash. Almost as soon as he stopped, Lu Yi felt that something was wrong. Just as the golden crescent slash was about to hit him, he grabbed the debauchee young master in front of him and rushed forward. In just a few steps, he had covered a distance of several feet, while the profound spirit bell in his other hand was instantly summoned. The sharp slash split the dandy young master in half, his blood spilling all over the ground as it struck the defensive spirit inscription on Lu Ye's chest, shattering it and sending Lu Ye flying. The profound spirit bell fell and once again covered Dong Shai, but in the next moment, a violent sound rang out and the surface of the bell began to flicker. Roar. Hoopa rushed out of the rain and rushed directly to Lu Ye's side. Lu Ye leapt onto his tiger's back and slapped a wind-walking spirit talisman onto Hoopa. Run. Dong Shai is crazy. Lu Ye didn't know who that dandy young master was, but since he could order Dong Shai around, he obviously had some background. Dong Shai had clearly reached an agreement with him before, but in the blink of an eye, he had turned hostile. In order to kill him, Dong Shai didn't hesitate to sacrifice the mortal young master's life. Lu Ye felt Dong Shai's determination to kill him. At this moment, his spirit chi was greatly consumed and his internal organs were injured, so he couldn't fight Dong Shai anymore. He could only escape, not even daring to take back the profound spirit bell. Just after Hoopa carried him away for a dozen breaths, the profound spirit bell suddenly exploded and Dong Shai appeared with a murderous aura. Although his face was covered in dirt, he had finally escaped. After a brief glance, he determined the direction in which Lu Ye had fled and soared into the air to pursue. This time, without the silk pants young master, his speed was noticeably faster. The rain gradually thinned and 2 hours later, the rain stopped. A rainbow hung in the sky like a bridge. Several cultivators rushed to the previous battlefield and found 3 corpses and traces of a fight. Recognizing one of the corpses, the cultivators felt their scalps tingle. Their dandy young master was dead. The sky had fallen. Not long after, the news spread and the dandy young master's family immediately issued an arrest warrant for Dong Shai. However, at this moment, Dong Shai had already chased Lu Ye for an unknown distance. As night fell, Hoopa carried Lu Ye and rushed into a rocky forest. Here, there were numerous thick stone pillars, each of them more than 60 meters tall. There were countless stone pillars densely packed together. Hoopa had run out of strength and had used up all 3 windwalk cards. Fortunately, Dong Shai had stopped chasing 2 hours ago. Lu Ye estimated that this guy's spirit chi was almost exhausted. After all, he had been chasing for such a long time. Even if Dong Shai's cultivation was higher than his, he couldn't withstand it. On the other hand, Lu Ye's spirit chi hadn't been exhausted and had even replenished it while Hoopa was fleeing. Although Lu Ye knew that Dong Shai wouldn't let the matter rest and wanted to run as far away as possible, it was true that Hoopa couldn't run anymore. When Windwalk was activated, it could run even faster, but at the same time, it also consumed more of its energy. He didn't need to rest, but Hoopa did. There was a natural shelter under the stone pillars. He found a relatively secluded spot and Hoopa ran over and directly lay down on the ground. His chest was heaving up and down, his tongue hanging out, just like a tired dog. Yi felt distressed as she watched. She gritted her teeth and scolded Dong Shai for being inhumane while feeding Hoopa water. Lu Ye checked his injuries. There were no obvious external injuries, only some internal injuries caused by the impact of the battle with Dong Shai. It wasn't serious and could be healed after taking a healing pill. From Dong Shai's actions during the day, he would never give up chasing him. He couldn't keep running like this in the future, but a fourth-order origin realm cultivation was still a bit too much for him. If he could reach the fifth-order origin realm, Lu Ye felt that he could fight Dong Shai. Chapter 139. It wasn't that Lu Ye was blindly confident that he could kill enemies several levels above him. Ever since he left Clear Sky Mountain, Lu Ye had killed many cultivators with higher cultivation than him. During the Dragon Spring Festival alone, he had killed 5 or 6 fifth-order cultivators. The defense and sharpness spirit tattoos could greatly increase his attack and defense, wiping out the gap in cultivation between him and his enemies. Therefore, killing enemies one level above him wasn't a problem for Lu Yi. Although he didn't know what Dong Shuyi had encountered, Lu Yi discovered something interesting during this fight. Dong Shuyi was only a 6th-order cultivator. Compared to 2 months ago, Dong Shuyi's strength had dropped significantly. If he had faced the Dong Shuyi from 2 months ago, Lu Yi felt that even if he had grown, he wouldn't be his opponent. It was impossible for a cultivator's cultivation to drop for no reason. Lu Yi secretly guessed that this guy's spirit aperture had been broken. The division of spirit stream realm cultivators was simple and clear. The number of minor circulatory systems in one's body determined one's cultivation. However, if one's spirit aperture was broken, then one of the minor circulatory systems would naturally be difficult to form. A broken spirit aperture wouldn't increase a cultivator's cultivation by much. At most, it would increase a cultivator's spirit energy storage. Was it done by profound sect? It was difficult for Lu Yi to find out what had happened to Dong Shuyi recently, but the broken spirit aperture was definitely related to profound sect's attack on 9-star sect's station. The root of this matter was still him. He finally understood why Dong Shuyi didn't let him off. If it was anyone else who encountered such a thing, it would be difficult for them to let it go. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they would fight to the death. This was a good thing for him. Lu Yi didn't have any thoughts about fighting a 7th-order Dong Shuyi. However, if the other party was only a 6th order, he might be able to fight. The premise was that he had to reach the 5th order. He had opened 54 spirit apertures, 9 more away from 63. If he cultivated wholeheartedly, he would only need less than 20 days. However, it wasn't easy to carry out this plan in the wild. Once Dong Shuyi chased him, he would have to run. Now that the other party had no more burdens, his speed was fast. If Hupa didn't have the Wind Spirit Talisman, he might not be able to outrun him. So, he needed a stable place to cultivate. With a plan in his heart, Lu Yi took out the 10,000 map to search and found a suitable place. He swallowed the elixir and opened the 55th aperture. In the middle of the night, Dong Shai came again. Lu Yi had no choice but to continue fleeing on Amber. Fortunately, Dong Shai hadn't recovered for long, so his speed wasn't very fast. This gave Lu Yi time to continue fleeing. 2 days later, Lu Yi rode on Hu Pu and charged into the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance headquarters. As soon as he stepped foot in, Dong Shai appeared in hot pursuit. Many cultivators in the hall looked over and were secretly shocked. It was mainly because Dong Shai's murderous aura was too strong and his eyes were red. A steward with only a 3rd-order cultivation walked over and said in a trembling voice, "Fighting is prohibited in the Merchant Union. If you two have any grievances, please resolve them outside." "Accommodation," Lu Yi said. The steward was at a loss for what to do. Dong Shai glared fiercely at the steward, as if saying, "If you dare to agree, you won't be able to see the sun tomorrow." The steward was even more frightened. At that moment, a powerful spirit energy fluctuation appeared. An old man in his 60s slowly walked down the stairs with a walking stick, coughing lightly from time to time. This old man was hunched over and looked like he would die at any moment. However, the aura around his body was even stronger than Dong Shai's at his peak. He was at least an 8th-order spirit stream realm cultivator. Seeing this old man, Lu Ye's heart calmed down. He had done business with the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance many times and knew of its powerful heritage. What he cared about the most was the name of the Commerce Alliance. It was very thought-provoking to have the words Heavenly Secret in its name. The cultivation of the maids and stewards who received guests and dealt with people in the Commerce Alliance wasn't high. At the very least, Lu Yi hadn't seen any cultivators with high cultivation. However, he had always felt that there must be a master in the Commerce Alliance. Otherwise, how could they protect so many valuable goods? There was no shortage of daring people who liked to take risks out of desperation in this world. Just as every sect needed a master to guard their station, the Commerce Alliance needed a master even more. This was why he had chosen the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance as his target. The Commerce Alliance was a place to do business. As long as he could rush in, he would be safe for the time being. The Commerce Alliance wouldn't allow any fighting to happen. Facts proved that his guess was right. There were indeed masters in the Commerce Alliance, but they wouldn't show up so easily under normal circumstances. When Dong Shai rushed in to chase Lu Yi, the ordinary stewards couldn't hold the fort. Naturally, the master here would show up. Dong Shai's eyes were filled with fear as he looked at the old man approaching step by step. He was much more knowledgeable than Lu Yi and knew what kind of colossus the Tianji Business Alliance was. If it wasn't for his misgivings, he would have already attacked when he charged in. Why would he only glare at Lu Yi? Two little friends, peace is the most important thing in all things. The old man walked over shakily and spoke with a smile. His face was amiable. He stood not far in front of Lu Yi and Dong Shai and lightly tapped the ground with the cane in his hand. With the cane as the center, a spirit light suddenly spread out in all directions. The corner of Lu Ye's eye twitched. He realized that he had underestimated this old man. This person was most likely on the same level as Tang Wu. This display of power was very effective. Dong Shai hurriedly retracted his killing intent and cupped his fists at the old man. Please forgive us for disturbing you. He was quick to back down. Lu Yi watched from the side and was secretly pleased. What about this little friend? The old man looked at Lu Yi. I'm here to stay. Anyone who comes is a guest. The old man smiled. Dong Shai's expression was ugly. The old man turned to the steward and said, Take this little friend to check in. The cost is 10 spirit stones per night. Wait. Lu Yi frowned. 10 spirit stones per night? He didn't know if he had heard wrong or if the old man had misspoken. The old man was still smiling. 10 spirit stones. The other merchant unions only charge 1 spirit stone per night. Lu Yi felt like he was being targeted. It was Dong Shai's turn to be secretly pleased. The smile on the old man's face gradually disappeared and his voice grew louder. Although everyone who comes is a guest, the merchant union is only a place to do business, not a refuge. If anyone dares to use the merchant union, they will have to pay the price. He looked at Lu Yi coldly. Does little friend understand? What he said was right. This old man was not related to Lu Yi, so he naturally wouldn't help him. He came forward to deter Dong Shai and at the same time, he wanted Lu Yi to back down. If the merchant union had not been neutral and did not participate in the confrontation between the two camps, he would have personally kicked these two out. I understand. Lu Yi didn't care about this. Right now, a stable cultivation environment was the most important. He took out a storage bag and tossed it to the steward. Stay here for 10 days. The old man was stunned and so was Dong Shai. Taking out 100 spirit stones just like that wasn't something a fourth-order cultivator would do. Holding the storage bag, the steward looked at the old man. A smile appeared on the old man's face again. Find the largest and best room for this guest. Yes. The steward responded and gestured. Guest, this way please. Lu Yi took Hu Po and followed the steward upstairs. The old man then looked at Dong Shai. What about you, little friend? Do you also need accommodation? 10 spirit stones per night. Dong Shai asked. Of course, the Merchant Alliance treats all customers equally. Then I won't stay. Dong Shai thought to himself. I'm not crazy. Who would stay in a room that costs 10 spirit stones per night? Now that I have Lu Yi here, I don't have to worry about him running away. After pondering for a moment, Dong Shai simply walked out of the merchant union and came to a shop across from it. Staring at the entrance, he took out 2 spirit stones and held them in the palm of his hand, slowly recovering. He didn't believe that Lu Yi could last for 10 spirit stones per night. The room was very big, much bigger than any of the rooms that Lu Yi had stayed in before. The decorations in the room also gave people a warm feeling. What surprised Lu Yi even more was that the heaven and earth spirit qi in the room was richer than the outside world. He secretly guessed that there should be something like a spirit gathering array here, which would make it convenient for his cultivation. Moreover, there was also a place to take a bath, which was very beautiful. After running around for so long, Lu Yi first ate a full meal with Hu Po and washed up before starting to cultivate. He had to raise his cultivation as soon as possible. The consumption of 10 spirit stones per night was too great. Even if he had some wealth now, he couldn't afford it. Lu Yi immediately felt a difference when all his spirit apertures were enchanted with spirit-gathering runes. Because of the rich world energy in the room, his cultivation became more efficient after the spirit-gathering runes were enchanted. He cultivated almost non-stop, opening his spirit apertures one after another. 56 apertures, 57 apertures, 58 apertures. He was really too tired, so he rested for a while. After sitting for too long, his qi and blood were stagnant, so he got up to practice his saber. Ever since he entered the spirit stream battlefield, Lu Yi had been cultivating diligently. However, he had never been so eager to increase his strength as he was now. It had nothing to do with Dong Shai. The main reason was that he had to spend 10 spirit stones per night. Time was money. On the 4th night of Lu Ye's stay in the Merchant Guild, in a room on the 5th floor, an exquisite manager was reporting to an old man about the Merchant Guild's recent profits. The old man was drowsy from listening. The manager didn't find it strange. After she finished speaking, she said, "There's one more thing I want to report to Sir." "Speak." "Recently, the spirit gathering array has cost a lot more spirit stones than before. It seems like it costs 3 or 4 more spirit stones per day." The old man finally opened his eyes. "What's the problem?" "Over at the Sky Room 3. Chapter 140. Sky Room 3 was Lu Ye's guest room. The old man pondered for a moment. This level of talent is rare. The higher one's talent, the more spiritual energy they could absorb. The reason why the spiritual energy in the heaven room was so dense was just as Lu Yi had guessed. There was a spirit gathering array set up in the room to gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. At the same time, it also consumed spirit stones. The stronger the spirit gathering array, the more spirit stones would be consumed. The old man had seen many cultivators with outstanding talent, and there were many who consumed more spirit stones than Lu Yi. But for a 4th-order cultivator to consume 3 or 4 spirit stones a day, it was quite unusual. "Should we kick him out?" the manager asked. "He doesn't owe you any spirit stones, how can we kick him out? Remember, we are doing business. No matter who comes, we have to be fair and impartial. We can't act according to our own preferences." "Yes. You may leave." The old man waved his hand. The manager respectfully left. The old man sat on the chair in a daze for a while, then slowly shook his head. He didn't know which sect's disciple came from, but he came to the outer circle to sharpen himself. However, if a 4th-order cultivator was targeted by a 6th-order cultivator, he wouldn't be able to live for long. On the 6th day of staying in the Merchant Union, while Lu Yi was resting, Hu Po came over and rubbed against him. Lu Yi looked at Yi. "What does Hu Po want?" Yi communicated with him and said, "That scale you took out last time, that's what Hu Po wants." Lu Yi suddenly understood and hurriedly took out the scale armor again. Hu Po stepped forward and took a deep breath of the scale armor. A line of blood flowed into Hu Po's nostrils, and he couldn't help but stagger back a few steps. Just like last time, he shook his head a few times before falling to the ground and fainting. A faint red light continued to wander around his body, tempering his physique. Lu Yi didn't plan to learn from Hu Po. The bloodlines in the scale seemed to be very strong, and even a monster beast like Hu Po couldn't withstand it. Lu Yi estimated that if he sucked in a mouthful, he wouldn't have a good ending. However, this thing really had a miraculous effect on body tempering. Hupo's physique had improved greatly after his last body tempering. Now that it was the second time, he didn't know what kind of growth it would have. He still maintained his cultivation frequency. Spiritual cavities opened one after another. On the 15th day of staying in the Merchant Union, under the constant impact of spirit energy, the barrier of the 63rd aperture gradually loosened. Just as the barrier was about to be broken, Lu Yi stopped cultivating. He stood up and checked his condition. He was full of energy and qi and blood. The 63 acupoints were about to be opened. He could start his plan now. He brought Hupo to the first floor of the Merchant Guild, found a manager, and spent 100 spirit stones to buy a few spirit talismans. As a result, he was only left with around 230 spirit stones. The main reason was that he had spent 150 spirit stones on the accommodation for the past half a month. However, it was worth it. Cultivating in that room had increased his efficiency by a lot. The original plan of around 20 days had been completed in 15 days. He had shortened the time by a few days. He had less than 100 spirit dawn in his possession. So, he thought for a moment, and decided to buy spirit dawn worth 200 spirit stones each. He then left over 30 spirit stones in reserve. When everything was ready, Lu Yi rode Amber out of the Merchant Guild. A pair of sharp eyes immediately stared at him. It was Dong Shuyi, who had been waiting outside the Merchant Guild for half a month. Their eyes met. Lu Ye's expression was ugly, as if he had lost his parents. Dong Shuyi's lips curled as he chewed the dried meat in his mouth and swallowed it down. Finally, without the slightest hesitation, Lu Yi directly slapped a wind-walk spirit talisman on Hupo and rushed out in a certain direction. Dong Shuyi soared into the air and chased after him. Behind him, the stall owner of the shop was in tears. Life was really difficult. He hadn't opened for half a month. Ever since Dong Shuyi stood here murderously, no one dared to patronize him. He didn't dare to drive him away. A sixth-order cultivation wasn't just for show. A third-order cultivator like him didn't dare to easily offend him. Now, this god of plague was finally gone. The stall owner couldn't help but cry when he thought of the bitterness of the past half a month. Hupo's speed had increased again. It was probably due to the bloodlines that had tempered his body. With the support of Windwalk, even if Dong Shai could glide and chase after him, he couldn't catch up. This made him feel frustrated. Fortunately, he had learned to be smart. While chasing, he threw a spirit pill into his mouth to supplement his consumption. At the same time, he held a spirit stone in each hand to absorb the spirit energy contained within. The situation returned to how it was half a month ago. As the chase continued, they continued deeper into the wilderness. Half a day later, Hupo's speed gradually decreased. He had consumed too much of his physical strength. Fortunately, Dong Shuyi was the same. Even with spirit pills and spirit stones, he couldn't replenish his spirit energy. As if they had a tacit understanding, they both stopped to recuperate, but this time, Lu Yi began to flee. Dong Shuyi naturally wouldn't let him escape and immediately chased after him. One day later, Dong Shuyi stopped in front of a cave, his brow furrowed. Just now, when he was in midair, he saw Lu Yi rush into the cave on the back of the snow-white tiger. This strange situation gave him a trace of doubt. Logically speaking, it was impossible for the fleeing party to easily fall into a deadly trap. Lu Ye's actions were obviously a bit abnormal. However, he quickly thought of a possibility. This cave might be connected to the other side. If Lu Yi escaped from here, his advantage of gliding would be gone. Thinking of this, Dong Shuyi no longer hesitated and plunged into the cave, quickly going deeper inside. Of course, he wasn't stupid. In order to prevent Lu Yi from ambushing him, he raised his hand and slapped a golden body talisman on his body. This way, even if the enemy launched a sneak attack from the dark, he would have time to react. The cave was dark and damp, But to Dong Shuye's surprise, Lu Yi didn't do anything in this cramped environment. The further he went, the wider the cave became. Until a certain moment, he rushed into a spacious cave in the belly of the mountain. This cave was about 2 acres in size and was more than 100 feet tall. There were stalactites hanging upside down on the ceiling, and water droplets were constantly dripping down, making a sound. Although the environment was dark, Yang Kai could see Lu Yi hiding in the innermost part of the cave at a glance. At this moment, Lu Yi was sitting cross-legged, his spirit qi surging. Dong Shuyi was sure that Lu Yi was up to something, but this was a semi-enclosed space. There was no other way out except for the entrance he had entered. In other words, as long as he blocked this exit, Lu Yi would have no way to escape. Yang Kai's heart settled. Finally, he caught Lu Yi. Even if Lu Yi had some kind of trick up his sleeve, it would be vulnerable in front of absolute strength. Taking a deep breath, Yang Kai showed a sarcastic smile on his face. "Is this the place you chose to bury yourself?" As soon as his voice fell, Lu Yi's aura suddenly fluctuated and his spirit qi fluctuated wildly. As a wave of qi swept out, the aura around his body suddenly brightened. 5th Order Spirit Stream Realm. Dong Shuyi was stunned. When he was chasing Lu Yi before, Lu Yi was clearly only a 4th Order cultivator, but now, after only a short time, Lu Yi had actually broken through to the 5th Order. This could only mean one thing: Lu Yi had been stuck at the edge of the 5th Order and had deliberately chosen this time to break through. Such a fast cultivation speed. 2.5 months ago, Lu Yi was only a 3rd Order cultivator. When Dong Shuyi saw Lu Yi reach the 4th Order, he was secretly surprised, but considering that Lu Yi had been stuck in the 3rd Order for a long time, it was normal for him to break through to the 1st Order. But now, Lu Yi's breakthrough was abnormal. 2.5 months to break through from the 3rd Order to the 5th Order, such a cultivation speed was simply shocking. Dong Shuyi felt more and more that he had made the right choice. If he missed this opportunity, even if he had the chance to meet Lu Yi again, he was afraid that he would not be Lu Yi's opponent. At that time, it would be hard to say who would be the one to kill who. Just as he was in shock, Dong Shuyi suddenly felt a spirit qi fluctuation behind him. Without even thinking about it, Dong Shuyi raised his hand and sent out a spirit technique. A shadow flashed, and at the same time, a spirit talisman exploded at the entrance of the cave. With the help of the spirit technique Yang Kai sent out, the rocks at the entrance of the cave shattered and fell down with a rumble, completely blocking the entrance. Dong Shuyi was slightly surprised as he realized that the spirit talisman just now was not attacking him, but blocking the exit. Now, even if he wanted to retreat, he could not. A strong spirit qi fluctuation quickly approached, causing Dong Shuyi to hurriedly turn his head and see Lu Yi rushing towards him like a bolt of lightning. At this moment, Lu Yi no longer had the mournful expression he had when he left the Merchant Union. His expression was calm and steady, and facing Dong Shuyi's golden arc slash, he twisted his body and dodged it. This was indeed a burial ground, but he had chosen it for Dong Shuyi. On the way here, he had asked Yi to find a suitable terrain because he had to take into account Dong Shuyi's advantage in gliding. If he saw that the situation was bad and Dong Shuyi was determined to escape, Lu Yi really had no way to deal with him. Therefore, if he wanted to kill Dong Shuyi, he needed a good geographical location. Yi had found a cave that was neither too big nor too small, barely meeting Lu Yi's requirements. He had asked Yi to use the spirit talisman to block the entrance of the cave because he was afraid Dong Shuyi would escape. Right now, the cave was completely sealed off. Today, only one of him and Dong Shai would be able to walk out alive. After breaking through to the 5th Order, he had gained a minor heavenly cycle system in his body, increasing his speed and explosive power by a lot. Lu Yi was confident that as long as he could get close to Dong Shuyi, he could kill him. Magic cultivators were indeed powerful, proficient in all kinds of spirit techniques and fierce attacks, but magic cultivators had another name. When he was chatting with Hua Ci before, she said that in the cultivation world, cultivators called body cultivators meet barbarians, weapon cultivators a group of iron-headed boars, and magic cultivators a group of brittle skin. Compared to body cultivators and weapon cultivators of the same level, magic cultivators' physiques were undoubtedly the worst because they had to study spirit techniques all year round and had no time to temper their physique. In fact, the physiques of those ghostly cultivators were even stronger than those of magic cultivators. When low-level cultivators fought, magic cultivators dominated if they kept a distance, but once they got close, the combat effectiveness of magic cultivators would be greatly reduced. Half a month ago, Lu Yi was only in the 4th order and could only get within 8 meters of Dong Shuyi, but now that he was in the 5th order, he was confident that he could break through the blockade of Dong Shuyi's spirit techniques and reach him. On the way, Lu Yi's figure flickered, dodging one spirit technique after another. The distance between them quickly closed, and under the illumination of the spirit techniques, Dong Shuyi's expression became a little flustered. Mobile users, please browse. Chapter 141. In the blink of an eye, the distance between them had been shortened to 10 meters. Dong Shai had just launched 2 spirit techniques, but Lu Yi had dodged them both. Spirit chi surged wildly as a fiery red disc appeared in front of Dong Shai. From the disc, fist-sized fireballs spewed out and densely covered the area in front of him. The dark cave immediately lit up. He had used this spirit technique 2.5 months ago when he was chasing Lu Yi. Compared to Golden Crescent Slash, the lethality of a single fireball was much lower, but it had the advantage of being numerous and covering a large area. Moreover, compared to using metal attribute spirit techniques, he was better at using fire attribute spirit technique. Lu Yi, who was rushing straight towards him, frowned and immediately dodged back, taking a step to the side. However, Dong Shai adjusted his direction at the same time and poured his spirit chi into the red disc in front of him. Hong 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 hong, fireballs flew out one after another and hit the walls of the cave, producing a dense sound. Behind a thick stalactite, the exhausted Hu Po was huddled there, motionless. It had consumed too much of its strength and could not help Lu Yi much, so before the battle began, Lu Yi had asked it to hide here to avoid being accidentally injured. And even if Hu Po still had its strength, it would be difficult for it to intervene in such a battle. Its growth was not small, but compared to the enemies Lu Yi had to face, it was still much weaker. Lu Yi's plan to launch a surprise attack had failed, so he could only keep circling around, using the stalactites on the ground to resist Dong Shai's attack. However, he was not anxious because this situation was advantageous to him. Dong Shai needed to consume spirit chi to maintain this spirit technique, so the one who should be anxious should be Dong Shai. Sure enough, after just a few breaths, Dong Shai changed his technique. He raised his hand and pointed, and a flying fire snake rolled towards the stalactite where Lu Yi was hiding. This fire snake was even more realistic than the fire snake summoned by the talisman. On the body of the burning fire snake, a few scales could be vaguely seen. The fire snake wrapped around the stalactite, but Lu Yi had already dodged in advance. Dong Shai turned his head and saw Lu Yi rushing towards him from the side again. He hurriedly circulated his spiritual energy and repeated the same trick. Another fiery red disc appeared in front of him, and from the disc, fist-sized fireballs shot out. At this moment, Lu Yi's figure began to become erratic, dodging one fireball after another, constantly closing the distance between them. Dong Shai frowned slightly. He found that compared to before, Lu Yi's reaction seemed to be a little faster. This was not an illusion. Lu Yi's movements were indeed a little faster. Although the increase in realm could increase a cultivator's strength, in fact, it would take some time to adapt to the new realm. In order to lure Dong Shai into the trap, Lu Yi deliberately blocked the 63 acupoints. When Dong Shai broke through, Lu Yi had no time to adapt to the changes in his body. He could only slowly adapt while fighting with Dong Shai. Fortunately, this kind of intense battle made people feel great pressure, so the speed of adaptation was also very fast. Lu Yi was forced back again, but he felt that he would soon be able to fully control his new power. He continued to hide behind the stalagmite, avoiding Dong Shai's spell attacks. When Dong Shai adjusted himself, he would attack. His reaction and speed were a little faster. Lu Yi had a strong intuition that this time, he would succeed. He dodged the incoming fireballs, and if he couldn't avoid them, he would use his defensive spirit rune to block them. 10 meters, 8 meters, 15 meters. Lu Yi raised his hand and drew his saber. The moment the saber was unsheathed, a fiery red spiritual energy wrapped around the blade, making it seem like it was burning in the dark space. With a flash of his saber and the support of his sharp spirit rune, Lu Yi slashed down at Dong Shai. The expression on Dong Shai's face became a little startled, as if he couldn't figure out how Lu Yi had managed to get close to him. Almost instinctively, he raised his arms in front of his body, as if he wanted to block the fierce blow with his body. With a crash, the golden light shattered. It was the golden body talisman Dong Shai had put on his body before entering the cave. With Lu Ye's fifth-order cultivation, an ordinary golden body talisman could not block it. With just one slash, the golden light was shattered. However, before Lu Yi could rejoice, a golden light flashed in front of him and 2 golden arc slashes flew towards him. The distance was too close and there was no way to dodge. "I've been tricked." Dong Shai was a 6th order or 7th order cultivator, so how could he make such a stupid move to block with his arms when Lu Yi suddenly appeared in front of him? Dong Shai wasn't trying to block his attack at all, he was just using it to cover up his spirit art. In order to deceive Lu Yi, the expression on his face was very real. Good acting. In fact, Lu Yi was wrong. The stunned expression on his face was genuine. Dong Shai didn't expect that Lu Yi would be able to get close to him so easily. Raising his arms was premeditated. He had always given Lu Yi the impression that he could only release one spirit art at a time, but in fact that was not his limit. When Lu Ye's blade slashed down, he took the opportunity to send out 2 golden arc slashes, because he felt that with the protection of the golden body talisman and his own spiritual power, under the double protection, Lu Yi would not be able to cut him down no matter what. However, if Lu Yi took 2 of his golden arc slashes, he would die miserably. Dong Shai's scheme succeeded, and his 2 golden arc slashes landed on Lu Ye's chest. Lu Yi was sent flying, coughing up a mouthful of blood as his chest tightened mid-air. But Dong Shai had also failed. The moment they clashed, Dong Shai let out a blood-curdling scream and retreated. Looking down, he saw deep wounds on his arms that were so deep that his bones could be seen. He couldn't help but stare. Is this really a slash from a 5th-order cultivator? Are you kidding me? That simple slash first broke his golden body talisman, then broke his protective spiritual energy, and cut off both of his arms. He secretly rejoiced that he had maintained his spirit chi protection at all times, otherwise, this slash would have cut off both his arms. How could a newly promoted 5th-order cultivator have such a sharp attack? What kind of spirit artifact did the other party have? When he was chasing Lu Yi last time, he had only seen Lu Yi use his defensive spirit rune to fight, so he knew that his spirit rune had an extremely strong defensive power. It was only at this moment that he experienced Lu Ye's offensive power for the first time, causing him to break out in a cold sweat. He was secretly afraid that he had almost screwed up. Cough cough. Lu Yi, who had been sent flying, stood up, his mouth full of the taste of rust. Dong Shai focused his gaze on Lu Ye's chest and was soon disappointed. Lu Ye's chest didn't have any traces of being slashed. At the last moment, he had activated the defensive spirit rune in time to block it. Although the slash was blocked, the impact couldn't be blocked. This caused Lu Yi to suffer an internal injury. Lu Yi examined his chest slightly and found that it was stuffy, but there were no signs of fractures, which was a good thing. After undergoing the dragon's spring body tempering, his physique had greatly improved, and his ability to resist attacks had become much stronger. Dong Shai didn't give him time to breathe. As soon as Lu Yi stood up, he endured the pain in his arms and continued to attack. Golden, red, white, all kinds of magic techniques were launched one after another in an endless stream. Lu Yi could only dodge in a sorry state. After a while, Lu Yi recovered and turned around to attack Dong Shai, his long saber burning like fire again. With the experience of rushing in front of Dong Shai once, it became much easier this time. Especially after Dong Shai's arms were injured, the frequency of him using spirit techniques had obviously decreased a lot. With Lu Ye's surprise attack, Dong Shai was also constantly retreating. At this time, the importance of choosing a battlefield in advance was reflected. If it was in the wild, Dong Shai only needed to slide away from Lu Yi, but in this sealed space, he had no way to use his advantage at all. The distance was quickly shortened again, and Dong Shai's expression gradually became ferocious. In the blink of an eye, Lu Yi had rushed to 3 feet in front of Dong Shai. While bending down to avoid a spirit technique, he raised the long saber in his hand diagonally. The saber that was sure to succeed hit empty air, and a powerful impact came from above. Lu Yi hurriedly raised his hand to urge his defensive spirit rune to block it, but the impact made him short and his body slide back uncontrollably. Looking up, Dong Shai was floating in the air, looking at Lu Yi with a mocking face. "Boy, you underestimate Lu Yi too much. He really couldn't fly, but he could use the Imperial Void technique, and with this spirit technique, he could fly for a short time. How could a 5th order artifact cultivator fight him unless he grew wings?" It could be said that the outcome of this battle was doomed from the beginning. He hadn't shown this ability before because he thought he could kill Lu Yi, but after this fight, he discovered that even if the other party had just broken through to the 5th order, he wouldn't be so easy to kill. Now that his arms were injured, he couldn't delay any longer and needed to end this battle quickly. Raising his hand and pointing it at Lu Yi, Dong Shai's expression became cold as spirit chi began to surge from his fingertips and a table-sized disc began to form. Lu Yi was too fast, and with his defensive spirit rune, it would be difficult for a single spirit technique to kill him, so Dong Shai was preparing to use a large area of effect spirit technique. He wanted to burn the entire cave to ashes. Only in this way would he be able to kill Lu Yi. The disc formed by the gathering of spiritual power slowly took shape, and spiritual power surged from below. Accompanied by a poochie-poochie sound, a fat firebird dove into Dong Shai's arms at lightning speed. With a bang, the fat firebird exploded, and Dong Shai fell from the sky with a stunned look on his face. The disc he had just formed also disappeared, and at this moment, the spirit chi fluctuations around his body became extremely chaotic. A spirit technique. This guy knows spirit techniques. Falling from the sky, Dong Shai almost lost the ability to think. He had never expected that Lu Yi, who had just broken through to the 5th order, would actually know spirit technique. What's more, the other party had used that spirit technique so casually that his casting speed was even faster than Dong Shai's, catching him completely off guard. Is this guy also a spirit technique cultivator? From the corner of his eye, Dong Shai caught a glimpse of Lu Yi quickly approaching and quickly adjusted his posture. However, he had been interrupted in the middle of casting his large-scale spirit technique and had even taken a direct hit from his opponent. Even if he had spirit chi to protect his body, the consequences were serious. At this moment, Dong Shai's spirit chi was surging violently and his spirit acupoint was extremely stiff. Chapter 142. With a good opportunity in front of him, Lu Yi rushed in front of Dong Shai in a few steps and slashed down with his long blade covered in spiritual energy. At the same time as the long blade fell, a strong pushing force came from Dong Shai's side. Dong Shai didn't know what kind of spell Dong Shai had used, but in front of the repulsive force, Lu Yi was pushed back more than 10 meters before he could stop himself. Looking up again, Dong Shai had already climbed up and raised his hand to cover his chest. A huge wound was clearly visible on the right side of his chest, and blood was gushing out, instantly dyeing his clothes red. His face was full of horror because just now, Lu Yi had almost killed him with his blade. In the moment when his spiritual energy was in chaos, he had no power to resist at all. Fortunately, at the critical moment, he regained control of his body. Although he was lucky not to die, such an injury was extremely serious. Ha! Dong Shai's figure staggered. At this time, he finally understood why Lu Yi had led him here and blocked the exit. This was not a place Lu Yi had chosen for himself, but for him. It was ridiculous that he had always thought that he could kill the other party with his own strength, but he didn't know that arrogance was the source of his failure. The enemy rushed towards him again, not intending to give him any time to catch his breath, just like what he had done just now. Moreover, in comparison, this enemy was more straightforward and ruthless in battle, extremely aggressive, because from the beginning until now, he had not said a single word, only constantly looking for opportunities to rush forward and then brandish his blade. Was this what a life-and-death battle should be like? Looking at Lu Yi, who was quickly approaching, Dong Shai took out a golden body talisman from his storage bag and slapped it on his body. Although he knew that this time, he was not willing to wait for death. With the golden body talisman protecting his body, he raised his hands and, regardless of the crazy consumption of his spiritual energy, cast a series of spells. However, both of his arms were injured, and his right chest was almost cut open. The large amount of blood loss in a short period of time made him dizzy, and even his breathing was not smooth. In this state, the speed of his spellcasting was much slower than when he first started. Amidst the attacks, Lu Yi rushed forward and slashed down with his blade. The golden light shattered. Even though Dong Shai had activated a spiritual barrier at the same time as the golden light shattered, it still couldn't completely block this fierce blade. This cut started from his right shoulder and stopped at his lower left abdomen, almost cutting his stomach open. Without waiting for Dong Shai to use any more techniques, Lu Yi had already swung his blade a second time, and the powerful resistance once again swept out, pushing him several meters away. By the time he regained his footing, Dong Shai was already floating in midair, his spiritual qi boiling and burning. However, having learned a lesson from the previous incident, he wouldn't just stay in place. Under Lu Ye's gaze, he was floating in the air at the speed of a jog. Lu Yi raised his hand, and a fat bird flapped its wings and flew up, but it missed. Accuracy was always a problem, and this was also the reason why Lu Yi didn't use his spells to fight. The reason why Dong Shai was able to hit Lu Yi the first time was mainly because he didn't expect Lu Yi to be able to cast spells. Moreover, Lu Ye's casting speed was fast enough that he couldn't react in time and was hit. That could be said to be Dong Shai's biggest mistake. The injury wasn't too serious, but the consequences of his spiritual qi becoming chaotic were unbearable. Their eyes met, and Dong Shai grinned sinisterly. He raised his hand and tapped on his own battlefield imprint. The imprint immediately glowed red. Lu Yi knew that things weren't looking good. Dong Shai was probably going to call for help, so he immediately increased the frequency of his attacks. After a short while, the light from the imprint on the back of Dong Shai's hand disappeared. At the same time, the spiritual qi around his body suddenly dimmed, and he fell to the ground. Lu Yi didn't understand the situation, but he quickly reacted. This guy's spiritual qi had been exhausted. Dong Shai, who was in his peak state, naturally couldn't run out of spiritual qi so quickly. In any case, he was a cultivator who had opened more than 108 apertures, so his spiritual qi reserves were twice as dense as Lu Ye's. Previously, he had consumed too much of his spiritual qi chasing Lu Yi. In order to prevent Lu Yi from approaching, he had continuously used his spells. No matter how large his spiritual qi reserves were, he couldn't withstand it. On the other hand, Lu Yi was different. With the amber carrying him, he had always maintained a perfect state. He even came here to break through a realm. With a bang, Dong Shai fell to the ground, feeling as if his whole body was about to break. Footsteps sounded from the side as Lu Yi slowly walked over with his saber. He didn't think Dong Shai was pretending to be him. Falling from such a high place wasn't a good feeling, especially when Dong Shai was seriously injured. In other words, this guy had really exhausted his spiritual qi. Standing in front of Dong Shai, Lu Yi looked down at him. Dong Shai's mouth and nose were full of blood, and his throat was gurgling. He looked at Lu Yi as if he wanted to say something. Lu Yi raised his saber, held the hilt in reverse, aimed at his heart, and stabbed down. Dong Shai's body suddenly straightened. "I'll wait for you on the Yellow Springs Road." At the last moment, Dong Shai gritted his teeth and said these words. His straightened body relaxed and he stopped breathing. His eyes were wide open. A red light floated out and fell on the back of Lu Yi's hand. Looking at Dong Shai's corpse, he suddenly felt that it was too surreal. 2.5 months ago, he was almost cornered under the pursuit of the other party. If it weren't for his good luck, he wouldn't have been able to escape that disaster. But only 2.5 months later, this powerhouse he once had to look up to died under his saber. It turned out that he was so much stronger than 2.5 months ago. "And I haven't used my full strength yet," Lu Yi whispered softly. He really hadn't used his full strength. He still had the Wind Walk Spirit Talisman. If the Wind Walk Spirit Talisman could be used on Hu Po, it could also be used on him. With his current strength, if he used the Wind Walk Spirit Talisman, his speed would be at least 30% faster. Lu Yi had originally planned to use the Wind Walk Spirit Talisman after he got used to the increased strength of his cultivation. Otherwise, if he rashly used this Spirit Talisman, he might not be able to control his body. If things went wrong, he might run into a wall like he had after the dragon's spring body tempering. Sometimes, it wasn't necessarily a good thing to suddenly increase one's speed too quickly, especially when facing a magic cultivator like Dong Shai. Lu Yi could avoid the other party's spells if he had complete control over his body, but if his speed exceeded his control, he might run into a spell. It was too scary to make such a mistake in a battle of life and death. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to use the Spirit Talisman in the end. He didn't make a mistake, but Dong Shai made a huge mistake and was knocked down by his Fire Phoenix technique. Yi popped her head out from the side, holding a Spirit Talisman. She cautiously asked, "Did you win?" Lu Yi lay limp on the ground, his arms and legs spread out. "I won." Other than using the Spirit Talisman to seal the exit at the beginning, Yi hadn't shown herself since. Lu Yi had repeatedly warned her not to make a move rashly, and to only activate the Spirit Talisman when the perfect opportunity arose or when he was in danger. However, this battle had gone much smoother than Lu Yi had expected, and Yi hadn't had a chance to make a move. "Lu Yi, you're really amazing." Yi was sincerely impressed. Lu Ye's lips curled into a smile. "We can't stay here for too long. Feed Hu Po something to eat and rest for a while. We have to leave this place quickly." Before Dong Shai died, he had used the battlefield imprint to send out a message. Although Lu Yi didn't know who he had said what to, there was a high chance that he was calling for help. Thus, they had to leave as soon as possible. What he didn't know was that as a traitor, Dong Shai couldn't possibly call for help from his former friends. Moreover, at that time, he had already sensed that he was going to die. Even if he had called for help, it would have been too late. He had only sent out a message, and that message had been sent to many people. After feeding Hu Po something to eat, Yi went to clean up the battlefield. Soon, she excitedly ran back with a storage pouch. Lu Yi, we're rich." Looking at her enthusiasm, Lu Yi knew that his harvest was not small. Dong Shai's storage pouch was still open because he had been taking things out of it during the battle. At that time, he hadn't had the time to lock it up. Lu Yi was sitting cross-legged on the ground at this time, refining some spirit pills to restore himself while eating. At the same time, he was checking his battlefield imprint. Name, Lu Yi. Identity, Blue Blood Sect Disciple. Cultivation, 63 apertures. Location, Spirit Stream Battlefield. Merit points, 397. When he left 100 Peak Mountain, his merit points were 368. Now, he had 29 more. Thinking about it, he had killed 2 Fourth Order Masters in the swamp before, which was worth 8 merit points. Dong Shai alone had given him 21 merit points. It seemed that although Dong Shai's cultivation had fallen to the 6th Order for some reason, the merit points he received from killing him were still calculated based on his 7th Order cultivation. Lu Yi had never been able to figure out one thing, and that was how Dong Shai's cultivation had fallen. He probably couldn't figure it out now. There were a lot of spirit stones and spirit pills in Dong Shai's storage pouch. After a quick count, there were 134 spirit stones and 57 spirit pills. This was Lu Ye's biggest harvest, enough to make up for the damage to the profound spirit bell. However, compared to Dong Shai's 7th Order cultivation, this was still a little shallow. This was Lu Ye's misconception. He always had a lot of cultivation materials in his hands, but that was because he had been selling yuan magnetic Oregon. Other cultivators didn't have such a foundation. Comparatively speaking, Dong Shai was very rich. After all, he used to be the guardian of 9 Stars Sect's encampment. The cultivation materials of his junior brothers and junior sisters were distributed by him. Occasionally, he would embezzle some to fill his own pockets. That was how he had such wealth. If it was an ordinary 7th Order cultivator, they definitely wouldn't have such wealth. Because cultivators needed to consume materials, the monthly allotment from the sect couldn't be saved up. After tidying up their spoils of war and making some minor repairs, Lu Yi and Yi moved away the rocks that were blocking the exit and walked out along the path they came from. Chapter 143. In the inner circle of the battlefield, in a dangerous place, a man covered in blood was meditating and adjusting his breathing. A young girl with 2 buns stood nearby on guard. Although she looked tired, her eyes were incomparably bright. Her young master was resting. No matter how tired she would not let anyone disturb him. This young master and servant duo was Wang Yang and Xiao Zhu from the Celestial Sect of Wonders. After conquering the Jiuxing sect's base, Wang Yang led Xiao Zhu out of the outer circle of the battlefield and into the inner circle. With their cultivation, only by tempering themselves in the inner circle could they obtain enough benefits. It was true that one could be considered a tyrant in the outer circle, but that would only cause one's cultivation to stagnate. Cultivators with a bit of ambition would move closer to the inner circle and core circle after their strength reached a certain level. Most importantly, it was only here that they could earn enough merit points. While meditating, Wang Yang suddenly opened his eyes and checked his battlefield imprint. His expression suddenly became very strange. Xiao Zhu heard the noise and turned her head. "What's wrong, young master?" Wang Yang looked at her. "You might not believe it, but Dong Shai sent me a message." Dong Shai? Xiao Zhu was surprised. After the Jiuxing sect's base was conquered, Dong Shai hurriedly rushed back. 3 of his spiritual cavities were destroyed by his young master. Since then, there had been no news of him. Later on, news spread from the Jiuxing sect that Dong Shai had betrayed the sect. The Jiuxing sect had issued a warrant for his arrest, but until now, the Jiuxing sect had not been able to capture him. The Spirit Stream battlefield was too big. Unless the Jiuxing sect sent a few cultivators with high cultivation to look for Dong Shai, it would be very difficult to find him. As for why Dong Shai was able to send a message to Wang Yang, it was naturally because the 2 of them had added each other as friends. It was not that the 2 of them were friends. The main reason was that the 2 of them were the guardians of their respective sections. The 2 sects were at odds with each other, and their junior brothers and sisters would often have conflict. As guardians of their respective sects, they would often have to negotiate. Leaving the other's imprint on their battlefield imprints made it easier to talk to each other. It could save a lot of trouble. Back then, it was Dong Shai who added Wang Yang. However, he regretted his refusal very much. Ever since the two of them could communicate through the battlefield imprint, Wang Yang would occasionally send out greetings such as, "Off with your dog head," or "Come out and die." This annoyed Dong Shai to no end. There were several times when he wanted to erase Wang Yang's imprint. Ever since Dong Shai's 3 orifices were broken, Wang Yang stopped looking for him. With his spirit orifices broken, his future was hopeless. Dong Shai was no longer a threat to Wang Yang, and he was also wanted by the 9 Stars sect. Wang Yang had no interest in dealing with a stray dog like him. Who would have thought that he would take the initiative to send a message today? What did he say? Xiao Zhu was curious. You might not believe it, but he actually sent me news about the mountain coaster. Tiger crossing the mountain, yeah? Xiao Zhu remembered this person very clearly. Although he was not a disciple of the Celestial Sect of Wonders, the fact that the Celestial Sect of Wonders was able to take over the 9 Stars sect's encampment was largely due to this person. At that time, she was even ordered by the young master to sell him an Earth-grade cultivation method. In a flash, almost 3 months had passed. Xiao Zhu did not expect to hear news about this person again. Moreover, it was from Dong Shai. There was something strange about this matter. No wonder the young master's expression was so strange. Take a look for yourself, Wang Yang said as he sent the message to Xiao Zhu. Xiao Zhu took a look and frowned. Lu Ye, riding a big white tiger, disciple of the Jade Blood sect of the War Province. He's a peerless genius. In 2.5 months, his cultivation base rose from the 3rd layer of the spiritual stream tier to the 5th layer of the spiritual stream tier. He's currently at Feng Yun Mountain and is suspected to be on his way back to the sect. It was a sentence without rhyme or reason. If Lu Ye saw this message, he would probably be dumbfounded. He could not afford to be called a peerless genius. Back then, when his talent was tested in the Evil Moon Valley, he was only a one-leaf cultivator. He was ridiculed by that little bearded man called Leshan. The Jade Blood sect of the War Province? Xiao Zhu laughed in surprise. Young master, we guessed wrong. Tiger crossing the mountain doesn't seem to be a disciple of a major sect. Yes, we guessed wrong. Wang Yang's lips curled into a smile. However, his background is not inferior to those disciples from the top major sections. The Jade Blood sect of the War Province. Xiao Zhu mumbled. She did not pay much attention to this sect when she first saw it. She only felt that she had heard of it somewhere before. Now that she heard the young master's words, she suddenly reacted. Which sect is that? It's that sect. Xiao Zhu was shocked. She vaguely sensed that something was not right. Why did Dong Shai send this message to the young master? He didn't send it to me. He sent it to all the brands in the imprint when he was about to die. He's about to die. He's already dead. Wang Yang had already tried to contact Dong Shai when he received the news, but the brand belonging to Dong Shai in the battlefield imprint was slowly dissipating, a sign that the other party was already dead. In an instant, Wang Yang understood Dong Shai's intentions. This simple message was likely to set off a huge wave in the Spirit Stream battlefield and even the entire 9 provinces. Wang Yang did not know how many people Dong Shai had sent this message to, but from the way he had chosen to send it indiscriminately, he should not have been far from death before he sent the message, so there was no time to identify who the brands in the imprint belonged to. Was it Tiger crossing the mountain who killed Dong Shai? It was very likely. According to the message, Lu Ye was already a 5th-order Spirit Stream Realm cultivator. Dong Shai's cultivation had fallen to the 6th order after he had broken 3 of his apertures. For some monstrous geniuses, killing someone 1 realm above them was not difficult. What kind of terrifying cultivation speed was this? If the message Dong Shai sent was correct, Then Wang Yang had really underestimated Tiger crossing the mountain. The other party was indeed not from a top force, but even the disciples from those top forces might not be as strong as him. Inexplicably, the blood in Wang Yang's chest surged as he suddenly stood up. Young master. Xiao Zhu did not know why her young master was suddenly filled with fighting spirit. The grand ceremony is about to begin. Let's go and meet the heroes of the world, Wang Yang said as he strode out, at the same time ordering, "Spread the news." Xiao Zhu followed behind Wang Yang and raised her hand to tap on her imprint. It was at this point that many people in the Spirit Stream battlefield received the message from Dong Shai. Some of them didn't react at all, as they had no idea why Dong Shai had sent such a message. However, some of them had very serious expressions on their faces as they quickly reported the news to their superiors. 1 spread to 10, 10 spread to 100, and in less than half a day, the news had spread throughout the Spirit Stream battlefield. Those who paid attention knew that a genius disciple had appeared in the War Province's Jade Blood sect. His cultivation speed was extremely fast, reaching the 5th order from the 3rd order Spirit Stream realm in just over 2 months. There was no shortage of cultivation geniuses in this world. Reaching the 2nd order Spirit Stream realm in just over 2 months seemed like a big improvement, but in the early stages of a cultivator's cultivation, as long as the resources and cultivation environment were good enough, this kind of speed could be achieved, especially for disciples from top sect. Or perhaps they had some kind of fortuitous encounter on the battlefield. No one knew what kind of space the Spirit Stream battlefield was, or where it was located in the 9 states. Some people speculated that the Spirit Stream battlefield had nothing to do with the 9 states, and that it was a world outside of the 9 states. Others speculated that the Spirit Stream battlefield was a space that had been isolated from the 9 states by some great power in ancient times. Both speculations had their reasons, because there were many ruins in the battlefield that did not belong to the 9 provinces at all. There were also some ruins that were extremely ancient. These ruins were usually not noticed by people and were hidden very deeply, but there were always some people with heaven-defying luck who could obtain some kind of fortuitous encounter in these places and soar to the heavens. If that Jade Blood sect disciple had some kind of fortuitous encounter on the battlefield, it would explain why he could reach the 2nd order Spirit Stream realm in just over 2 months. But soon, news about Liu Ye spread from the 9 provinces. Less than half a year ago, the War Province's Grand Heaven Alliance attacked Evil Moon Valley. After Evil Moon Valley was captured, the 10 sects began recruiting disciples, and Liu Ye was accepted by the Jade Blood sect. His real name was Liu Ye, and Ye was just a nickname given to him at that time because during the talent assessment, he had only 1 leaf. At that time, he had only opened the first aperture. In other words, Liu Ye had grown from a 1-apertured cultivator to a 5th order Spirit Stream realm in less than half a year. On average, he would advance by 1 realm every month. Compared with 2.5 months to reach the 2nd order Spirit Stream realm, it was undoubtedly more shocking to go from a 1-aperture cultivator to a 5th order Spirit Stream realm in less than half a year. A 1-leaf cultivator could not be called a genius, and his rapid growth could only be explained by a fortuitous encounter. Moreover, he did not have a good cultivation environment, because the sect master of the Jade Blood sect, Tang Yifeng, was ambushed on the way back to the sect. Later, news spread that although Tang Yifeng had killed the ambusher, he had also been seriously injured. For the past half a year, he had been recuperating in Ao Mountain. As for Liu Yi, he had died tragically in the aftermath of the battle. The Jade Blood sect, which had just accepted 1 disciple, had lost its inheritance. Grand Heaven Alliance's Vice-Union Master, Pang Zhen, confirmed this news and was furious. He ordered a thorough investigation and caught a few big fish that were secretly colluding with the Myriad Demon Ridge camp. At that time, this matter caused an uproar in the entire War Province's cultivation world. But now, it seemed that Pang Zhen was talking nonsense. Liu Ye did not die at all. Instead, he was sent to the Spirit Stream battlefield by Tang Yifeng. Even whether Tang Yifeng was seriously injured had yet to be confirmed. After all, Tang Yifeng, that old thing, looked like an immortal and was highly respected, but in fact, he was full of evil tricks. Back then, the cultivators of the 9 regions' myriad Demon Ridge camp were deeply poisoned by him. News spread very quickly in the cultivation world. In just one day, Liu Ye's origin, and even the fact that he and the sect master were ambushed on the way back to the sect, were all dug up. The only thing missing was the color of his underwear. Some things could not be hidden at all. As long as there were clues, those who were interested could connect all the dots. For a time, many sects became serious. A few decades ago, the Jade Blood sect of the War Province was a famous sect in the entire 9 provinces. It was also the nightmare of many hostile forces. During that era, the cultivators of the myriad Devil Ridge struggled to survive under the oppression of the Jade Blood sect. Chapter 144. At the core of the battlefield was the encampment of the second-grade sect, Pill Heart sect. On a mountain peak at the back of the mountain, there was a protruding rock that resembled an eagle spreading its wings. It was called Eagle Flying Rock. A figure sat on the Eagle Flying Rock. He wore a white close-fitting robe embroidered with red clouds. It outlined his tall and sturdy figure. He had a head of snow-white hair and looked to be in his 30s. However, his eyes were filled with vicissitudes. He sat on the flying Eagle Rock with one leg bent and the other hanging in the air. There was a wine gourd beside him. Looking at the setting sun, he narrowed his eyes slightly and reached out to grab the wine gourd beside him. He raised his head and drank, but there was no more wine in the gourd. He only drank in loneliness. The white-haired young man shook the gourd and sighed. At this moment, his eyes lit up as he looked at a streak of light flying over from below. He chuckled. "The wine is here." He waved at the streak of light. After a short while, the streak of light landed beside him, revealing a delicate and cute girl. The girl had an exquisite figure and wore a green dress. Her beautiful hair was tied into 2 ponytails. As soon as she appeared, she smiled at the young man. The dimples at the corner of her mouth were very beautiful. "Senior brother!" the girl called out crisply. "What senior brother?" The young man glared. "Call me Martial Uncle." The girl tilted her head and looked at him. A sly light flashed in her beautiful eyes. "Are you sure?" The young man said seriously. "Seniority is not to be confused. Your father is my senior brother, so of course you have to call me Martial Uncle." The girl put her hands behind her back and stepped on the air, pretending to leave. She looked at the young man from the corner of her eyes. "Then think carefully. Only senior brother will have wine to drink. As for Martial Uncle, you can go wherever you want." "Junior sister Chan you're so naughty," the young man reprimanded seriously. Only then did the young girl called Chan let out a pft and retracted her foot. She then took out several jars of wine from her storage pouch. The young man hurriedly opened one of the jars and sniffed the aroma. He grabbed the wine jar and drank a few mouthfuls. He burped in satisfaction and asked casually, "Where did you get this wine? It's a little old." The young girl poured the wine she brought into the young man's wine gourd and casually said, "My mother buried this wine in the jade bamboo forest." The young man was stunned and looked at Chan in a daze. "This isn't your dowry? You're too daring. If your mother finds out..." Chan giggled. "If you don't say it and I don't say it, how would my mother know?" The young man looked at Chan with a conflicted expression, then at his wine gourd. He tilted his head back and took a few more gulps. Who cares? He was used to being beaten since he was young. As long as he didn't leave the Spirit Stream battlefield, that old witch wouldn't be able to do anything to him. "Senior apprentice brother, when are you going to marry me?" Chan sat in front of the young man and asked with a serious expression. Cough, cough, cough. The young man coughed violently. He wiped his mouth and reprimanded the young girl. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm your martial uncle. The young girl tilted her head and touched her red lips with her finger. 32 years ago, that night, you kissed. She didn't look old, but in fact, she was good at maintaining her appearance. It was impossible to tell her true age from her appearance. Shut up. The young man looked flustered and looked around with a guilty conscience. If your mother hears this, do you think I'll be able to live? Moreover, I was still young at that time. She was only a few years old at that time. How could she remember it so clearly? He couldn't bear to look back on the past. Then I won't say it. Chandra looked at the young man with a smile. She even stretched out her hand and pulled at her lips, as if she was trying to sew them shut. The young man immediately felt a headache coming on. After being together for so many years, he was very clear about the young girl's personality. The more she acted like this, the more likely it was that she had something important to say. He sighed. If you have something to say, just say it. Chandra smiled. Then I'll say it. You have to marry me. Shut up. The young man turned around decisively, leaving his back to the young girl. You don't want to hear about the Jade Blood sect? Chandra's voice sounded from behind him. The young man turned around and his expression became serious. His mouth twitched a few times before he finally said in a hoarse voice, Is it going to be dethroned? It's about time. Chandra shook her head, her large eyes turning into crescents. The Jade Blood sect might not be dethroned. What do you mean? The young man frowned. After not accepting disciples for 30 years, the Jade Blood sect was on the verge of being dethroned. In 2 months, the sect's grade assessment would begin. This kind of assessment was not something that could be interfered with. His old man and his senior sister had held on for 30 years, but the Jade Blood sect had slowly fallen from 1st grade to 9th grade. This time, it would be impossible for it to retain its name. I heard that half a year ago, Old Man Tang accepted a disciple, but on the way back, he was attacked. Old Man Tang had no choice but to send him to the Spirit Stream battlefield. Now, this little guy named Liu Ye has reached the 5th Order and is on his way to the Jade Blood sect station. Before Chandra finished speaking, the young man stood up, his face filled with shock and disbelief. The old man accepted a disciple? It seems so. Where did this news come from? Can you confirm it? I don't know where it came from, but the news has spread and many people know about it. Spread? The young man frowned and muttered, Not good. Saying so, a layer of sword light wrapped around his body and he flew off. Remember to marry me. Chandra shouted behind him, but there was no response. She just snorted lightly, You're in such a hurry that you didn't even ask for my location. Saying so, she sent a message to the young man, explaining the information she had in detail. The next moment, a shout came from the front, You're not allowed to leave the sect without permission. Li Baxian, what are you trying to do? As the voice shouted, it fell down, but no one knew what it had encountered. On the flying eagle stone, the girl named Chandra also stood up and muttered to herself, Sacred Flame Sect, Golden Cloud Pavilion, 100 Refinements Valley, which one should I go to? Forget it, I'm too lazy to think about it. Looking around to make sure there was no one around, she took off one of her embroidered shoes and threw it into the air. When she landed, she looked at the tip of the shoe and muttered, This direction, 100 Refinements Valley? Then let's go to 100 Refinements Valley. Saying so, she raised her hand and threw out a handkerchief. The handkerchief immediately expanded in the wind and turned into a spirit artifact several meters in diameter. Chandra flew onto the handkerchief and flew off. The voice from before quickly sounded again. Senior Sister Yuechan, where are you going? Dodge, dodge. Chandra waved her hand without holding back. Ayaya. That voice continued to cry out as it continued to descend. After a while, a figure crawled up from the ground with a dusty face. He looked in the direction the handkerchief had left in, as though he had lost his parents. The guardian and deputy guardian had run away together. Ever since the establishment of the Pill Heart sect, such a ridiculous thing had never happened before. They were in deep trouble. He hurriedly sent out a message, telling his fellow sect members to guard the various important locations. He even activated the defensive array to prevent enemies from taking the opportunity to invade. At the same time, he sent someone to inform the 9 provinces of what had happened. 2 days later, at the 100 Refinements Valley's encampment in the inner circle of the battlefield, the sect's defensive array was activated. The guardian who presided over the place looked at the woman in the sky with resentment. "Feng Yuechan, what are you doing?" However, he could only hide in the defensive array and shout. He did not dare to run out and provoke her. There was no other reason. The woman flying in the sky was the top of the spirit stream list. Moreover, she was a wily old fox who had occupied the top spot for more than a decade. It was not that Feng Yuechan had a heaven-defying cultivation talent. She was not bad in terms of talent, but it was not enough for her to occupy the top spot for more than a decade. The main reason was that this woman had been delaying her cultivation. More than a decade ago, she had opened 360 spirit apertures, and everyone thought that she would advance to the Cloud River realm. However, more than a decade had passed, and she had not advanced. More than a decade of consolidation in the spirit stream realm had allowed her to possess spirit energy purer than ordinary people. That was not all, but the key point was that this woman was a Dharma cultivator. Without advancing her cultivation, she studied Dharma technique. As a result, this woman's strength grew stronger with each passing year. Ever since she occupied the top spot more than a decade ago, she had not moved down. It was rumored that she was proficient in more than 100 Dharma technique. An ordinary 9th order spirit stream realm Dharma cultivator would at most grasp a dozen or 2 Dharma technique. They might only be proficient in a few Dharma techniques. In comparison, this woman was terrifying. Being stuck like this was not a good thing, especially for a cultivator like Feng Yuechan who was extremely talented. As she grew older, her potential would gradually decrease, and if she didn't advance, it would definitely affect her future achievements. One had to know that people of her generation were basically all in the Cloud River realm, and there were even a few who were already in the True Lake realm. Therefore, even though she had always occupied the top spot of the spirit stream list, there was no cultivator from any sect who wanted to push her down. The price they had to pay was too high. The spirit stream list was an extremely fair list. It was self-generated by the spirit stream battlefield, and was not arranged by humans. Therefore, even if a female cultivator from a second-order sect had always occupied the top spot, none of the cultivators from first-order sects would question her strength. Over the past decade, whenever the genius cultivators of the various sects advanced to the 9th order spirit stream realm, most of them would choose to do their best to break through and leave the spirit stream battlefield. After all, it was not good to be powerless to resist being ridden on by a woman. Just now, the cultivators of the 100 Refinements Valley had a deep understanding of the strength of the person at the top of the list. After a few Dharma techniques, the defensive array of the encampment actually hummed. One had to know that although the 100 Refinements Valley was only a 4th-order sect, it had been a 1st-order sect 40 years ago. Because too many of them had been killed by a certain sect, they had fallen from 1st-order sect to 4th-order sect. A centipede dies but does not fall down. The 100 Refinements Valley still had a very strong foundation. However, at this very moment, the encampment of a sect was actually blocked by a single person. All of the cultivators of the 100 Refinements Valley were hiding in the defensive array and trembling. It was obvious how powerful the person at the top of the spirit stream list was. Facing the doubts of the people below, the young girl Feng Yuechan responded with a fireball the size of a house. Compared to Feng Yuechan's fireball technique, the difference between Dong Shai's fireball technique and Feng Yuechan's was like the difference between a grandson and a grandfather. Chapter 145. It was as if the sun had fallen. When the fireball smashed into the protective array, the entire base shook and spiritual energy exploded. Although the protective array blocked the power of the spell, the power of the fireball still seeped in, causing the temperature in the base to rise. "Tell your people to come back, or this young lady will start a massacre." Feng Yuchan stood on her flying spirit artifact and shouted. The guardian envoy in charge of the station didn't dare to be negligent and quickly sent a message to his senior brother and senior sister. He could tell that Feng Yuchan wasn't joking. For a moment, some of the 100 Refinements Valley cultivators who were rushing towards the outer circle of the battlefield cursed and retreated. In recent days, the Spirit Stream battlefield had been very lively, much livelier than before, especially the sects in the inner ring. Several sects in the Grand Heaven Alliance camp had declared war on the nearby Myriad Demon Ridge forces. What was even more outrageous was that a Grand Heaven Alliance sect called the Ding Palace had crossed the territories of several sects and declared war on Clear Sky sect, which was thousands of kilometers away from them when the war was declared. The low-level cultivators of Clear Sky sect were stunned. They were thousands of kilometers away from each other, and their territories weren't close to each other. Although they were in different camps, there was no hatred between them. They didn't know how they had provoked the Ding Palace. Only a few cultivators with higher cultivation understood what was going on because they had received some orders from their sects in the 9 states. They were ordered to immediately rush to the outer ring of the battlefield to find traces of a person. They naturally didn't want to pay attention to such a declaration of war, but they couldn't ignore it either. The cultivators of the Ding Palace had come all the way to their doorstep and blocked the low-level cultivators from leaving. In desperation, the Spirit Stream 8th and 9th Order cultivators of Clear Sky sect could only return to the station to calm the people. In the first 2 days, there were only a few such declarations of war, but as time passed, there were more and more. According to the statistics of the Heavenly Secret Commerce Alliance, in just 5 days, the declaration of war between the two camps had swept over hundreds of sects, big and small. This was something that was impossible to happen in the past. This was the first large-scale battle between the Grand Heaven Alliance and the Myriad Demons Ridge in the Spirit Stream battlefield after a few decades. This matter involved too many sects, and even the sects in the core circle were paying attention to it. This battle would determine whether the flag of the Grand Heaven Alliance that once commanded the 9 states could be preserved. Originally, this flag was supposed to fall in 2 months. However, during this sensitive period, a minor character had suddenly appeared to maintain this flag. How could the Myriad Demon Ridge tolerate this? After more than 30 years of waiting, the melon was about to fall when it was ripe. No one wanted to complicate matters, so no matter what, that little 5th Order cultivator had to die, and that flag had to fall. This concerned the reputation of the 10,000 Demons Ridge. At this time, in a desolate mountain range, Lu Yi shook off the blood on his long saber. Several cultivators from the Myriad Demons Ridge were lying on the ground around him, his brows furrowed. He faintly felt that something was not right. A few days ago, after killing Dong Shuyi, Yang Kai once again set off in the direction of the Blue Blood Sex Station, both physically and mentally relaxed. However, since the battle 3 days ago, something strange seemed to have happened. 3 days ago, he was leisurely hurrying on his journey when a group of cultivators suddenly came towards him. It was normal to encounter cultivators in the wilderness, and Lu Yi had encountered too many cultivators along the way. However, under normal circumstances, both sides would take the initiative to avoid any misunderstandings. When he encountered this group of cultivators, Lu Yi wanted to avoid them, but the other party rushed straight at him with a look of pleasant surprise, as if they had picked up money. Since the other party was so impolite, Lu Yi naturally had nothing to say. He rode on Hu Pu and charged forward. Although this group of cultivators had a 5th Order cultivator, how could they be Lu Ye's opponent? In a short while they were all killed. After collecting the spoils of war, Yang Kai set off again. However, something unexpected happened. Soon, Lu Yi encountered another group of Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators. In just 3 days, he had killed 6 groups of people, collected more than 20 storage bags, and gained more than 100 merit points. Lu Yi was a little unhappy, because this would delay his trip. What made him even more annoyed was that there was something wrong with his spirit energy. His spirit energy seemed to have some impurities. The reason why he could cultivate without any hidden dangers was because of his talent tree. He had carefully observed his talent tree. Every time he took a spirit pill to cultivate, the pill toxins in the spirit pill would be burned by the talent tree and then expelled from his body. Therefore, his spirit energy had always been extremely pure, and there had never been a case of pill toxins accumulation like the sect master had mentioned before. Even without the sharpness and defense spirit rune, his strength could surpass any cultivator of the same level just by relying on the purity of his spirit energy. Because the purer the spirit energy, the greater the destructive power of a cultivator's spirit energy. The same saber slash, but different cultivators with different spirit energy purity would erupt with different power. But now, some impurities had appeared in his spirit energy. Last night, when he was resting, he carefully checked the situation of his talent tree and was shocked to find that it seemed to have lost its ability to burn pill toxins. This was the root cause of the impurities in his spirit energy. He could grow from a cultivator who had just opened his apertures to the 5th order in less than half a year because of the talent tree. If the talent tree lost its ability to burn pill toxins, his future cultivation speed would be greatly reduced. This discovery made Lu Ye's mood quite heavy. Today, he encountered Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators blocking his way again, so he didn't hold back and killed them all. However, he also thought about it a lot. This situation might not be impossible to change. The talent tree needed to absorb some fire attribute or scorching energy. This energy could not only burn the leaves of the talent tree, but also act as fuel for the talent tree to burn pill toxins. If the fuel it absorbed was used up, it would naturally not be able to burn pill toxins. Lu Yi didn't know if his guess was correct. If he wanted to verify it, he would have to find another source of energy for the talent tree to absorb. The first time the talent tree absorbed the orange flame sealed in a piece of ore, and the second time it absorbed the scorching heat under the barrier-breaking fruit tree. The amount of energy it absorbed was roughly the same, but Lu Yi didn't know where to find it. The first 2 times were just coincidences. Fortunately, his previous spirit energy was pure enough. If there were only a few impurities, it wouldn't affect him much. Now, he just couldn't take spirit pills as recklessly as before. At most, he would take 1 a day and use spirit-gathering spirit runes to improve his strength. He still had a lot of spirit stones on hand. He originally planned to go to the Heavenly Secret Commerce Union and ask if he could buy something to fuel the talent tree. But now, he couldn't go. In the past few days, he had encountered several waves of Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators, and each wave was led by a 5th order cultivator. He felt like he was being targeted. Yi was cleaning up the battlefield. Lu Yi looked up and saw an eagle circling in the sky, seemingly looking for prey. At the same time, 3 kilometers away from Lu Yi, under a big tree, several cultivators were gathered. Several corpses were lying around them, and in front of them was a miniature spirit artifact that looked like a shadow moon disk. Lu Ye's figure was reflected on it. It was a bird's-eye view from high up in the sky. Several people were quietly watching the scene on the miniature shadow moon disk. A man gulped. Is that a 5th order cultivator? They had seen with their own eyes how Lu Yi cut down the group of Myriad Demon's Ridge cultivators like he was cutting melons and vegetables. His movements were clean and nimble. At a glance, it was obvious that he had killed many people. Moreover, the speed at which he killed his enemies was something that ordinary 6th order cultivators couldn't compare to. Are we sure? Another person asked. Don't be mistaken. A 5th order cultivator riding a snow-white tiger from Feng Yun Mountain to the Blue Blood sect. 16 or 17 years old, who else could it be but him? The leader of the group, a voluptuous woman, spoke. The miniature shadow moon disk was maintained by her spirit energy. Looking at her cultivation, it was clear that she was a 7th-order cultivator. Accompanying her were 3 6th-order cultivators and several 5th-order cultivators. It was impossible to see such a small team in the outer ring of the battlefield under normal circumstances. They had originally set off from their own station to the junction between the outer ring and the inner ring. Because of their strength, it was a suitable place for them to gain experience, but halfway through, they received orders from their masters and hurried over. They didn't know much about the grievances of the previous generation, but they knew that their sect owed a debt of gratitude to the Blue Blood sect. So, when the news began to spread uncontrollably, their sect elders ordered them to come and rescue this young man riding a white tiger and protect his safety. They weren't the only sect to take action. The entire spirit stream battlefield was now surging with undercurrents and surging waves. Many sects wanted to protect this young man, but even more wanted to kill him. This was a game between two camps, and the young man's life or death would determine the final outcome. Chapter 146. We've found him, what should we do next? Should we approach him directly? A 6th-order cultivator in the team asked. That's not appropriate, another person shook his head. It's better to protect him in secret. Many sects in Myriad Demon Ridge have already taken action. We're close and came early, which is an advantage, but if we expose ourselves in the open, we'll be easily targeted. Moreover, this person should be unclear about his current situation. If we approach him rashly, it'll be counterproductive. It won't be good if he harbors ill feelings towards us. But protecting him in secret might not be enough to protect him. If it were up to me, just knock him out and take him away, a burly man suggested. Everyone turned to look at him. The burly man was at a loss. Am I wrong? Yes, a 6th-order cultivator nodded. Go knock him out. The burly man shrunk his neck. I'm afraid I'll be cut by him. Although he was a 6th-order cultivator, he wasn't sure if he could win against that boy. That boy's attack just now was too fierce. In the end, it was the 7th-order female cultivator who made the decision. I'll contact him and protect him. The rest of you follow him in secret. No one had any objections to her decision. But soon, everyone's expression became strange because the female cultivator tore at her clothes as she walked forward. She even used her hands to support her chest and tried to squeeze in the middle. A 6th-order cultivator couldn't bear to watch. For the sake of her sex mission, Senior Sister Lan was going all out. On the other side, Lu Yi rode on Hu Po and continued forward. Not long after, he heard a faint cry for help. He listened carefully and found that it was indeed someone calling for help, and it was a woman. He didn't immediately go forward. They had encountered a lot of strange things along the way, so it was always right to be cautious. Not long after, Yi, who had been scouting ahead, returned and conveyed a message to Lu Yi. A woman was injured. It seemed that she had encountered some kind of monster beast, but there were no traces of traps nearby. Lu Yi nodded and had Hu Pa change direction slightly. Senior Sister Lan, whose clothes were tattered, was still desperately calling for help. Suddenly, her battlefield mark moved. She checked it and was stunned. He ran away? That brat actually ran away. Under normal circumstances, if a woman in the wilderness called for help, wouldn't they run over to check on the situation? But why did that brat run away? Was he not shouting loudly enough? Was he not miserable enough? Senior Sister Lan stood up in a daze, a vein popping out on her forehead. This little bastard, I really want to beat him up. Not long after, Senior Sister Lan, who had changed into a clean set of clothes, joined the others. Her face was so gloomy that it was about to drip water. What do we do now? Senior Sister Lan pondered for a moment with a gloomy look on her face. The original plan is that I'll find a way to get in touch with him, and you guys follow him in secret. We can, but this little brat has a mount and his speed is a bit fast. We can chase him for a few days without any problem, but after a long time, we definitely won't be able to catch up, a sixth order master said. Senior Sister Lon said, Don't worry, we only need to protect him for a while. Once we reach the front, people from other sects will come and take over. Hearing this, everyone calmed down a little. If that was the case, then this mission wouldn't be too difficult. At night, Louis was eating barbecued meat with Big Tiger beside the bonfire when he suddenly sensed spiritual energy fluctuations nearby. He quickly got up and vigilantly looked at the thick night ahead. Only a moment later, a figure flew over. Louis raised his hand and pressed the hilt of his saber as he stared coldly at the newcomer. It was a disheveled woman with an enchanting figure. It was unknown what she had encountered, but at the moment she looked flustered. After seeing Louis, she rushed straight towards him and shouted, Senior brother, save me! Someone wants to kill me! Louis slowly drew his saber, and Senior Sister Lon immediately sensed that something was wrong. She had a feeling that if she dared to approach, the boy in front of her would definitely cut her with his saber. The other party's eyes were sending her a very serious message. This little brat, she quickly stopped, tears welling up in her beautiful eyes. Senior brother, save me! Saying so, she took the initiative to raise the back of her hand, revealing her battle mark. Behind her, several figures chased after her. One of them paused, glanced over at Louis, and immediately shouted, It's a fifth-order cultivator, run! As soon as the voice fell, the few cultivators who chased after her ran away. Louis frowned slightly and looked at the woman again. Seeing that she was only a fourth-order cultivator, he slowly sheathed his saber. Senior Sister Lon let out a long sigh and looked at Louis pitifully. Senior brother, which camp are you on? Louis ignored her and continued to eat the barbecued meat. Hoopa raised his paw and gave him a push. Louis leaned back and leaned on Hoopo's belly. After a moment, his eyes moved slightly. Interesting. No wonder this woman's voice sounded familiar. It was the woman who asked for help during the day. He had never seen this woman before, but he had seen her from afar. It was he who ordered Hoopa to push him. This woman couldn't ask for help during the day, so she came to me at night. What does she mean by deliberately getting close to me? And she's from Grand Heaven Alliance. While Louis was deep in thought, Senior Sister Lon squeezed out a smile. Senior brother, can I hide here for a while? Sure. Why is this little thing so cold and arrogant? Senior Sister Lon almost couldn't suppress the anger in her heart, but she still squeezed out a smile. Then I won't be polite. As she said this, she walked over as if she was familiar with him. She seemed to be unguarded. She seemed to be in a sorry state because she was being hunted down. There were some wounds on her body, and her clothes were stained with blood. Some of her body was exposed. She sat down in front of the bonfire and stretched out her hands to warm them. She thanked him. Thank you for what you did just now. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I would have died. I can't repay Senior Marshal Brother for saving my life. Louis threw a piece of barbecue at her. Senior Sister Lon caught it in a hurry and was stunned for a moment. This guy is cold on the outside but warm on the inside. Thinking of this, Senior Sister Lan's anger subsided a little. Looking at the beast meat in her hand, it was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. It was fragrant. Her stomach rumbled and she was hungry, so she started eating. Senior brother, how should I address you? Senior Sister Lon asked while eating. I'm Lon Yuti. Don't talk when you eat. Is it delicious? It's delicious. Didn't anyone tell you not to eat things given to you by strangers? Louis stood up and walked towards Lon Yuti step by step. Lon Yuti's face changed slightly as she vaguely realized something. She hurriedly threw the barbecue meat in her hand to the ground and pushed her spirit chi. It was extremely sluggish, and her various major and minor circulations were about to collapse. Before she could stand up, a long saber was placed against her neck. Staring at each other, Lon Yuti was furious. Little bastard, you drugged me? She finally couldn't hold back the anger she had been suppressing, but what was more important was the humiliation she felt. She was a 7th-order cultivator, but she had been drugged by a 5th-order cultivator without anyone noticing. If news of this were to spread, she wouldn't be able to face anyone in the future. The main thing was that she didn't expect him to do such a thing. No one would do such a thing. Don't worry, that drug will only make your spirit chi flow sluggish temporarily. It won't cause any harm. He had found it in the storage bag of the 9 stars sex young master. Later, he had Hua Ci appraise it and memorize the effects of each drug, so he had kept it. Tell me, why did you approach me? What? Lan Yudi was puzzled. You were the one crying for help during the day, and now you're the one asking for help at night. Is there such a coincidence? Lan Yudi really didn't understand. This little brat clearly hadn't seen her during the day, so how did he recognize her? Just by her voice? Looking at Lu Yi, who was looking down at her, Lan Yudi suddenly smiled. Amazing! The target of this mission was unexpectedly shrewd. You admit it? And Lan Yudi lowered her head, her long hair covering her expression. Lu Yi immediately sensed that something was wrong because the aura around this woman's body was becoming denser at a speed visible to the naked eye. Without any hesitation, he chopped down with his saber. Lan Yudi, who had been sitting in front of Lu Yi, was now upside down. With one hand on the ground, she kicked at Lu Yi's face. This kick was so powerful that Lu Yi hurriedly leaned back and retreated a few steps. By the time he stabilized himself, Lan Yudi was already 15 meters away from him. She reached out and touched her slender white neck. Her hand was sticky, and the corners of her eyes couldn't help twitching. Do you really want to kill me? If she hadn't dodged fast enough, her head would have been chopped off. Just how vicious and merciless is this guy? Across from her, Lu Ye's expression became dignified because he discovered that this woman wasn't a 4th-order cultivator, but a 7th order. He didn't know what method she had used to hide her cultivation. No wonder the things he found in the storage bag of the 9 stars sect young master didn't have much of an effect. Her cultivation was 3 minor realms higher than he expected, so it was easy for her to suppress the medicinal properties. Meanwhile, Hupa had already hidden himself in the darkness, waiting for an opportunity to strike. This old lady is in a bad mood right now, so I've decided to beat you up first, Lan Yudi said as she suddenly turned into a blur and rushed towards Lu Yi. So fast. He had never come into contact with a 7th-order cultivator before, so he didn't know how powerful a 7th-order cultivator's attacks were, but this woman's speed was too fast. Fortunately, he had the dragon's spring body tempering, otherwise, with his eyesight, he really wouldn't have been able to see her movements. Lan Yudi's figure rushed towards him from the front, but Lu Yi swung his saber to the side. The long saber brushed past the tip of Lan Yudi's nose, and she flew back a few steps. She looked at Lu Yi in shock. Did he see through my movements just now? Or was that slash just a coincidence? Without the slightest pause, her figure once again turned into a blur. Lu Yi constantly adjusted his direction and swung his saber again and again. A moment later, Lan Yudi was shocked because she discovered that Lu Yi had really seen through her movements. Every slash of his saber landed on her attack path.